Hey, welcome everybody. First off, welcome everybody to Opening Acts 2018. Thank you guys for all coming. We've obviously got some great panels lined up, so we're going to get going on the first of them. So before we just jump right into the topic at hand for it here, we'll do some introductions so you know who everyone is. First off, we'll just probably just do name, what your current role is, and then maybe let's do what your first job in IT was, because that's sometimes interesting on where you were at, or first job in tech. So first off, I'm Mike Letchin. I'm currently the field CTO for Nexenta, and I did a web page for a financial aid office for my university. I think was the first one that was like a real tech job that wasn't just fixing somebody's computer randomly.
Hi, I'm Rick Creasy. My current job, I'm a VMware certified instructor. I teach for VMware and Global Knowledge. And in my first job in IT, I was doing phone support for dial-up internet customers. It goes way back. It was not fun, no.
Same.
Hey, I'm Keith Townsend. I am a VMware. Hello. Hey, I'm Keith Townsend. I'm a VMware solutions architect for VMware. My first IT job was phone support, third shift, future traders. It was a proprietary data platform.
My name's Sean Massey. I'm a technical architect for Ahead, a consulting firm out of Chicago. My first tech job was building a database for a really small real estate company right after college.
My name is Rebecca Fitzhugh. I work in technical marketing at Rubrik, and my first IT job was I did cryptography in the United States Marine Corps.
I'll just share Rebecca's mic, it's fine. Hi, my name is AJ Kuftik. I'm a senior architect at Highmark. We are a Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance provider in the state of Pennsylvania and a couple other states. And my first tech job was doing PC support in a steel mill.
At a steel mill, huh?
Yeah, I don't recommend that.
Yeah, that doesn't sound. Yeah, hot, lots of random.
It's super fun when you have to wear flame retardant clothing to work.
Probably steel-toed shoes and everything.
Oh yeah, whole
nice.
thing. It's fun when they're bright orange and you go to Target after work in them.
So I know what really we wanted to kind of get into was where the things that, how'd you move to where you are kind of thing? What took you to the skills to get you into your current position, hence starting with what your first job was. So since you were at a steel mill, what got you out of the steel mill? We'll start with that. What were the skills that you thought that really needed to get you out of the steel mill?
There were technical skills and people skills they're two different things. The first one was starting to think through larger projects, starting to think through larger things. Even when you're doing PC support, you still have to do big things, replace PCs for production purposes, lease replacements, that sort of stuff, and starting to build through all of those various components and what needs to be done and timelines. That was a big deal. Also, the fear of everything around you usually drives you out first.
So you said you were doing phone support to start. Wow, that got really loud all of a sudden. You were doing phone support. So what got you away from the phones?
Well, what initially got me out was I got my CCNA in about 1999, and that was my first certification. And so that kind of set me up to take the next step and get into the networking team there. And then from there, I just kind of continued to work my way from there.
So certifications is an interesting one. What do you guys think? Are certs one of those skills that you have to move up now? Or what's your take on that? And just anybody jump in. No.
Yeah, so since my mic
no.
Whoa!
Yeah, baby. His mic works now.
It's new gear. New gear.
Get this guy a T-shirt for
yeah,
best
yeah.
mic handling, please.
Yeah, there you go.
You know what? I don't think certifications are as critical as they.
I think you just went back out again.
Yeah, I don't think. Can you guys hear me? All right. So I don't think certifications are as critical today as they were when I started back in the mid '90s. I think the industry is shifting over from having those hard skills to softer skills.
I think it depends on what type of job you want, though, as well. right? A lot of corporations, you know, you may have to get a certification to kind of move to that next team, but there's other paths also to demonstrate that knowledge. If you work in any sort of consulting or professional services organization, your employers are incented to have certified people. And in order to advance and in order to get your company the better discounts and whatever else that comes with the different tiers of the partner programs, you have to have certifications. So in a way, having more certifications in those roles helps you advance your career.
So it helps you advance your career if you want to stay hands-on technical.
Well, not
with
necessarily
them,
even
or do you think outside of that too?
Outside of that too, because even if you're in a sales role, there's sales-specific certifications, or even just having the certifications helps the overall organization. But that's in one narrow part of the industry.
Yeah, so I spent most of my time on the customer side, and I think it was important for my partners, resellers, etc., to have certifications. But the team that I worked on, you know, you could be like literally you go into an organization, a customer side organization today, they can't tell you the difference between a VCP, a VCDX, or a VExpert. They're all the same thing to
true.
them. So VExperts rock.
So what I would say is that if you want to move forward in your career, it doesn't necessarily mean that certifications are bad. They can certainly be a goal that you work towards. There's certain things that you have to learn as part of that you might not see in your day-to-day operations. But if you're going to do it for you. Don't do it because there's going to be a pay raise at the end of that rainbow, because there usually isn't.
So you need it sometimes for the resellers. You might need a bonus or something involved if you're in-house for a shop. And what about for a vendor? Do you think working for a vendor, do the certs really matter at all? I have my opinion.
Well, my hiring manager is sitting right there, so that might be a better person to ask. I think no. I mean, for me, I've always kind of personally viewed certifications as being the metric to prove to myself that I attain the skills as a part of the studying. Because for me, I'll say I want to learn Azure, or I want to learn something, and if I don't give myself something to work towards, like a certification, I'm not going to do it. So it's more of what I'm learning in the studying process, and then I just do the test as the goal to work towards that actual certification itself.
So I purposely kind of kept you out of it for a second. As an instructor for it, it's helpful for you if people get certified.
Well, I would say two things, just to kind of piggyback off of what Rebecca just said. As somebody who's done a lot of hiring over the years, to me, what she said echoes why I like to hire people with certifications, because it shows that not necessarily that they just got certified, but that they had the ambition to do something to differentiate themselves. And I think it almost demonstrates more in that regard than it does actual technical knowledge, because, you know, lots of people, like you said, don't really know what each certification is, but it does demonstrate that they have some sort of ambition and have put extra work in to get to that point. So I think that's very valuable. And from an instructor perspective, I get asked all the time by my students, you know, is this certification going to get me a job? And I say, well, not necessarily, but it can't hurt, and it might help you get your foot in a door that otherwise you would not get your foot in, you know. So I would say, no, they're not a magic bullet to get you everything you want in your career, but they can be kind of the thing that gets you moving in that direction. And I think that's really the most valuable thing of all, is to get your foot in the door and get started.
So I think that goes on to the comment about soft skills a bit too. So even once you get in the door, you got to get through the interview process of some sort. How much of even getting in the door do you think is more networking and the people you know nowadays versus dropping it? I mean, how many people have actually gotten a job from putting their resume on Monster recently? Is Monster even still around?
Maybe.
There's a couple of them. I don't necessarily know that Monster is the biggest one anymore. Yeah. But no, I think networking in particular, knowing people, maintaining communications. So you're here, you're at VMworld, you're meeting a lot of people. There's a lot of people in this room right now that have the capability to help you along the way, and you're showing initiative that you want to be better in your career, that you're trying to do more. And if you start talking around the room, you can find out that there are people here from vendors, there are people here from partners. that can help you along that way. And I think that soft skills kind of goes a long way to what Keith was saying, is that if you have the soft skills to be able to, work a room and be able to talk to people and introduce yourself, that helps, or have people introduce you.
More thoughts on soft skills down there? Or
I think your soft skills have to at least be adequate enough for you to be able to verbalize the technical skills. If you can't sell yourself and what you can do, then, I mean, what's the...
doesn't matter whether
Exactly.
you're
You
not
can be the
even going to get
smartest-
through the interview at that point.
You can be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't tell me how you did something, right, or describe a methodology, or you basically verbalize whatever technical thing that you did, then I don't know that you actually can.
And to build off that, the saying has always been, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But in our industry, I think it's what you know helps you meet new people in a lot of these cases, right? Because a lot of us up here on this panel, we're active in social media. We're all V experts. We're all, in some cases, people know who you are in some ways, right? And I don't want to make that sound, like, I'm getting full of myself or anything.
You're kind of a big deal.
But well, no,
You're
I'm
so
not.
famous.
But the point I'm trying to make is a lot of us, got to meet people because we were active on social media talking about technology, and then when we go to VMugs or go to conferences, it's like, oh, hey, I'm so and so. Yeah, I know who you are because I follow you on Twitter, or I read your blog, or you introduce yourself, going, hey, I've wanted to meet you because your blog has helped me. So what you know helps you meet new people.
Yeah, I've definitely gotten 2 jobs through Twitter, so social media works sometimes.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I quit my job via social media.
Is 6 working?
No.
Okay,
Oh,
here.
again.
I thought we had it fixed.
That's okay.
I was wrong.
Really simple example of both ends of the soft skill, developing soft skill over a long career, and you knowing someone. You knowing someone can help you overcome poor soft skills. Case in point, right after I graduated high school, no college, didn't have any kind of track on a job. So I went, the fast food restaurant route, applied for this Wendy's like 3 times, got interviewed, couldn't get the job, talked to my cousin who worked there, put in a good word for me. The manager came back and told me, like, you know what, Keith, I actually thought you were, I think the proper term is mentally undeveloped at the time that I interviewed you, just because I was soft-spoken, I was very timid, and because my cousin put in a good word for me, I got the job. That, you fast forward today, how many times have you seen people you're thinking, man, that guy really doesn't know what he's doing? It's all about who you know a lot versus your actual skill.
I'm still stuck on you being soft-spoken.
Hard lesson. You know what? Whenever I try and whenever I shrink back, this is my natural personality is to shrink back. I remember those words. They're burnt from a lot of years ago. Those words are burnt into the back of my mind. So I make sure not to do.
So that brings up the kind of that shrinking back into it. A lot of people consider themselves, whether they're introvert or extrovert, and a lot of people in this industry would really consider themselves normally an introvert. So if you're going to say, okay, you've got to step out of your box some, but what kind of advice would you give for them to be able to kind of, what can they do that isn't going to be overwhelming and just make it so much harder to do that networking and that next step to help their skill set?
Be friends with an extrovert.
Yeah.
I mean, go be friends with Ariel, and he'll take you to, he'll have you meet every single human in this room. Meet people who want you to meet people. Hey, this is Rebecca. You should totally talk to Rebecca. She's really great. Rebecca doesn't want to talk. But in terms of like,
she's kind of a big
you
deal.
start to introduce people and you start to make connections.
Do you have a question?
And maybe maybe you're an introvert, the other person's more or less an introvert, and you just don't really want to talk together. But you can have a conversation one-on-one versus being in a room with 20 people with a microphone in your hand. There's 2 separate ways to do that. And I don't think that necessarily that being an introvert that doesn't mean that you don't like being around people all the time. Sometimes it can mean that you really like to have one-on-one conversations or maybe very small group discussions versus, blathering on a stream. Of
Sitting
some
on a
sort.
panel, just talking at people.
Yeah, that.
Well, I think like if you think about it, like I think I would consider myself an introvert. I think probably Sean would, just because
I'm
I know
definitely
Sean
one.
the best on the panel. And it's like, so when you think about it, it's like extroverts get energy from talking to people, and introverts lose energy from talking to people. So it's kind of knowing how much juice, if you will, you have in the bank, and not pushing yourself beyond that limit. Where like when I hit that social limit, I shut down. I'm done, and then I'm probably going to turn into a cranky 2-year-old approximately, where I'm like, I want to go home. So it's I need to know when I'm hitting that limit, and it's time to politely excuse myself and go home.
And I think your level of comfort with the people you're with also helps with that, right? Being with Ariel, he makes you feel very comfortable. He's very good at introducing you to people. So even as an introvert, it's not as taxing. Whereas if I'm alone in a room of 100 people and I have to introduce myself and walk up to people, that's a little bit harder. But now at a VMworld, I'm pointing at Rebecca because it's easy. But now at VMworld, you know more people, you're more comfortable with them, so it's easier to walk up and start the conversation. And then as somebody comes by, you know somebody, you can introduce them, or they know somebody, they introduce you. So it's just a different dynamic as you get more comfortable with the people in the community.
So I would add in that even if you're an extrovert, introducing yourself to someone you don't know is still terrifying.
Yeah, I definitely would consider myself an extrovert. It's still not the easiest thing in the world. Just randomly walk up to someone you don't know all the time. It's not that easy all the time. So not just on the networking on the soft skills, but looking at career-wise on it, are things like working on your presentation skills. Would you guys consider that a valuable, more soft skill that people should be doing to grow their careers on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was really the key engine to me getting promoted into management, was working on my presentation skills. And I'm an introvert myself, but I've chosen a career that every week puts me in front of a new group of students. And it sometimes is challenging. What I would say is, like, the mantra that I adopted early on was, if you're uncomfortable doing something, the best thing you can do is just do it over and over and over again, and that's the only way to get over it.
Doesn't count for driving a car.
No,
if you're uncomfortable, get off the road.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's what I would do. So the way I became a trainer is developing my own training content in-house for the companies that I worked for. That was also how I got visibility and kind of separated myself from the pack. And, the more you do it, just the more comfortable it gets. And so by nature, similar to Rebecca, I don't like being in front of people, talking to a bunch of people, but eventually it starts to become comfortable to you,
What do you guys think about presentation skills?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's what drives value to the business that you work for and the team that you're on. So it, for me, is equally important in my particular role to be able to get on stage and talk to 1,000+ people, as it is for me to be able to stand in front of my peers or my immediate team and justify an idea or ask for budget or to make other things happen. So to put it in perspective, not everybody has a role where they have to go stand in front of 1,000 people. So what's more important for you is not being able to necessarily get up on this panel and talk, but for you to be able to verbalize an idea to your team, get buy-in, and make that happen. That's what's really important. And to be honest, that's harder and scarier than bidding up here or being on a stage of 1,000 people. Because when you're on a stage of 1,000 people, I don't know any of you. And there's lights in my eyes. I can't see what's going on. When I have to stand up in a room full of my peers and my team, that's way scarier to me. Because they are going to be like, wow, she really is as dumb as we thought.
I can't overemphasize how important presentation skills are. As we start to accept that the industry is changing, there's going to be people who create, design, and run data centers, and there are going to be people who consume those data centers at a very high abstracted layer. So our ability to show via, look at the cool script or set of servers I ran or the automation I've created, starts to move away to us consuming these services, it's going to be a little bit tougher to show your value. So you have to go up and say, you know what, this is the value I bring. This is what we've done.
You're not being cocky by saying it, but you need to tell people what you're doing.
You got to tell people, like, what is that one guy that sits in the room all day? What does he do? There's no servers anymore, so what exactly does he do? You need to be able to articulate what you do.
Yeah, I would expand it from presentation skills to communication skills in general. You need to be able to write it, because sometimes you don't get the shot to put it in on PowerPoint and stand in front of people and point at a screen and go, this is what we're going to do. Sometimes you got to write it in an email. Sometimes you got to write it in a document. Sometimes you have to put it on paper, or you don't get the chance to have visual aids with you or paper, and you got to stand there and explain it to somebody because you happen to catch them in the hallway. Communication skills, to me, are more important than technical skills, because all the stuff we learned 4 years ago, a lot of that stuff has gone by the wayside. Or things that are coming in the future are not what we were doing before. And so you have to be able to iterate on those technical things, but communication skills will take you forever.
And you have to be able to iterate and communicate that to multiple audiences as well. You're not just going to be communicating to peers. Sometimes you're going to be communicating to management. Sometimes you're going to be communicating to end users. And you have to be able to set your tone and, you know, pick the right words and right method of communication for your target audience.
Can I give you an example?
It needs to be to the right audience, too. Learning how to write those emails or write that letter to the right audience that you're writing for. If you're writing to an exec, it's a different level than if you're writing it to a bunch of admins.
So my wife is a communications person, and she saw the very first like VMware design presentation I was doing, and she said, "What is that, and why are you telling people that?" And I said, "Well, it's this technical thing, and it's this thing that's going to make things better." She's like, "Yeah, and where are you saying that? Because all of this is just gigs of RAM and mumbo jumbo. Has nothing to do with anything. Who are you presenting this to?" I was like, "The senior manager of infrastructure." And he goes, "Yeah, does he care about any of that?" "No." "Change it all. Rewrite the whole thing." And so that night I had to rewrite the whole thing, and then I gave her back a different one that had nothing to do with technical things, all around business objectives. That sort of thing sticks in the back of my mind when I'm writing things to try and elaborate as to what audience am I going for. Am I talking to my team or my technical peers? Yeah, some of those details might matter. But to somebody up the food chain who is paying for things or is interested in why this design is important, they don't care about how many gigs of RAM we're putting on a SQL box. They care about why we need to put more gigs of RAM on the SQL box.
Likewise, if you're communicating to end users, they don't care about any of that. They just care, how long am I going to be impacted for, and what's the change going to be?
Right.
And then for those of us at different points in our career, it's the inverse. So when I find myself talking to engineers and I'm talking digital transformation, blah, 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 they're like, what? How does that have to do with why should I upgrade to the latest version of vSphere? I don't like 5.5 seems awesome. Like, why should I go to 6.7?
Working just fine. What am I getting
fine.
out of it? Right.
And what does digital transformation have to do with me meeting my MBOs and whatever else?
So I think one of the other things on those soft skills is how you present yourself in general. And how do you want people to view? Sometimes it's just be a little more cleaned up on what your style is. It's that dress for the job you want, not the one you have thing.
There's a reason I'm wearing this on a plane at 7 in the morning. I didn't do it because I wanted to be comfortable. I wanted to look professional. I wanted to be able to project a level of professionalism and a level of knowledge. And this is effectively my confidence suit, right? I'm more than happy to wear t-shirt and shorts to things, but if this is what I feel comfortable standing in front of an audience and speaking authoritatively about something, this is what goes on my body.
Do you guys think that it matters? You obviously do. The rest of you, do you think what you're wearing that day matter as much?
I think it may not matter so much to your audience. For me, confidence in presenting and talking to people comes from preparation. You know, if you are very well prepared, it gives you a sense of confidence going into that interaction. And for me, part of that preparation is wearing clothes that I'm going to feel comfortable being in front of that audience in. So I kind of view it as more of a holistic approach. I want to, have my notes ready. I want to look very well prepared, and I want to dress that part too. And yeah, I think it can't hurt. Nobody ever said you dress too well.
Right. Sean, or either or Keith.
So I'll say don't do what Sean does here. This is the caveat to start with. Shorts.
It's really hot out there. I won't wear shorts today.
Well,
I have to be dressed
I'm
the
not
whole rest
alone.
of the week.
I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So I've gone into workshops with customers that have had executives in them, and I've worn, on occasion, a hoodie and jeans because I'm the engineer doing the architecture, and that's what I'm comfortable in. And I've had some customers that haven't cared, and I've had others where it's been a big issue. And it just really depends on the culture of the company, right? Some companies have a very laid-back culture. Others don't. And, part of being prepared is knowing what that is and making sure you're properly debriefed. So in my role as a consulting architect, if I'm not properly prepared, I can make a mistake like that. And while I'm comfortable, the customer's not.
And then from a diversity standpoint, that goes completely out the window for minorities and women. You should very much be aware of what you have on in every situation, because unconscious bias is already at work. So if I come in with a hoodie and jeans, frankly, they might call security on me. So that's just, it just is what it is.
I told you I was sorry. It was one time.
You know what?
It was one time.
One time's a mistake. But seriously, the minorities and women, literally, unfortunately, we do have to worry about what we, how we present ourselves, because there's just, you want to take away those unconscious biases as much as possible. And so you do. I'm a little bit more well known in this community, but this isn't typically what I would wear on a panel.
Yeah, I would not normally ever wear shorts on a panel.
Yeah,
like this.
there you go.
Right, what's your thought on that, Rebecca, coming from the female perspective on that?
I don't have a comment.
No comment. So getting off of the soft skills then for a bit. Obviously, tech skills are still going to matter. If somebody's looking today on what those things they should be looking at to learn, start researching, what technology really should they be looking at versus some of this can just kind of gloss over it, know what it is, but maybe you don't need to spend a lot of focus on it. It's not going to be there in the next year or two.
I would focus less on specific technologies and think more along just general systems thinking, right? Even if you go back to legacy vSphere or you go towards cloud things, doesn't really matter. Thinking about everything in terms of the overall system and not just this one little thing that you really care about. Like a vCenter upgrade is not terribly hard anymore. It really isn't. It's all the stuff around it that's the hard part. Sometimes you got to deal with other people. Sometimes you got to deal with other teams, other vendors, waiting for their code to come out. Those sorts of things are the harder part, and thinking about all of the inputs and outputs of the system that you're trying to work on and what it is that you need to do is exceedingly important. And I find that that's the big leap. When you're an engineer and you can start thinking in overall systems and overall builds and not just on the deep dive technologies on things. Because I'll be really honest, I understand the interactions between all of our various pieces in our infrastructure. Do I know them all very deeply? No, I won't even claim to know that. It's not about knowing those things as deeply as possible. It's about knowing how everything kind of works together and then working with the right people who know them deeply. Because some people care. Some people want to know how deep they can go on something like NSX, or they want to go super deep on something like vSAN. Great. I just need to know if it's going to go boom when I upgrade, and when it goes boom when I upgrade. And I don't want it to go boom, so I have to think about all the things that go around it and coordinate that with all those people. And that comes back to the soft skills as well. Communication as well.
I would agree with the architect perspective there. I mean, obviously, if you're an engineer level person, knowing the exact nuts and bolts is kind of the job. So then you do need to be able to dive deep. But I think, like, from the architect perspective, dead on. Because you need to be able, as an architect, to kind of zoom out and be able to look high level as to what is the framework tying everything together and be able to dive deep within certain facets. But I don't necessarily need to be as deep in that particular realm as the actual SME. But that SME ideally can kind of zoom out a little bit, but it's more important for them to know the actual inner working. So I think it's really relative to the role.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Systems thinking and how the systems go together and how they talk to each other is going to be really important, especially as we start moving into this multi-cloud, hybrid cloud world where you have different pieces and different platforms. It's going to be less about the technology and more about consuming it. The other thing I would say to that, and this is probably more of a soft skill than a hard skill, is you have to know how to learn. And you have to know your learning style and how you can learn something quickly, because even as an architect, you're going to be put into a situation where, you know, somebody's going to walk in and say, the dev team wants to use Kubernetes for this project, right? And you have to understand, you have to be able to learn whatever technology it is really quickly so you can slot it into the rest of your architecture, or come back and say, no, we can't use this for this reason.
So I'm going to put the business analyst hat on a little bit and say that it depends. The consultant answer, sometimes you can say, okay, I'll look at a concrete technology and deep dive into that technology. The way you discover if that's important to you or not, find out what it is that if you're happy in your job and your director, VP, what is it that they're either excited about or keeping them up at night or they're constantly talking about? If they're constantly talking about cloud and cloud readiness,
Go learn cloud.
All on cloud. You need to understand from a high level, what type of cloud are they talking about? Are they talking about, oh, we've installed a vSphere 6.7 environment and now we have cloud? Are they talking about, oh, we've gone completely off-prem and we have all of our stuff in VMC on AWS? Or are they talking about refactoring the applications? And this goes back to, I used that buzz term, digital transformation above. What are the business objectives? If one of your competitors won the CIO of the Year award, what are they doing? If they're doing something in a specific technology, that's an indication of where you need to probably pick it up yourself in learning or acquiring a specific technical skill.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything everybody here just said. I would say don't lose focus on some of the less hot technologies, because that's what people have right now. You know, so nobody wants to say, hey, focus on vSphere. You know, focus on, can you configure a Cisco router, or can you read a config of a firewall? Because those are things that are fairly common skills, but those might be the things that are keeping that manager up at night, and he's going to need somebody to come put out that fire. And the other thing that I would throw out there, probably the skill that served me best, is just knowing how to troubleshoot. You know, having a clear troubleshooting, problem-solving methodology that you can apply universally to whatever problem may arise. You know, because if you're the guy that can go in there and just fix whatever's broken, say, I've hardly even touched this, but I've got the internet, I've got Google, and I've got my troubleshooting methodology or my problem-solving methodology, having a concrete kind of ethos about how to do that stuff, I think is an extraordinarily valuable skill to have.
So, Sean, you mentioned education while you were giving your answer there. So how important is traditional education to people in IT today?
Ooh, that might be a very loaded question.
You're on a panel that they're supposed to be,
Yes.
that's the point of a
Yeah,
panel.
no, because no. So a traditional education, I think, is important because, like, when you think about the traditional liberal arts education, it's designed to challenge you and teach you how to develop opinions and how to think, right? And how to, develop some, methodologies for solving problems and analyzing different things, right? We also, in our field, the traditional liberal arts education is also looked down upon in a lot of ways because it's all this, soft, touchy-feely stuff. But some of the most successful people I know are people who don't have a technical degree, who got a liberal arts education, and who were able to apply their skills there to solve technical problems. Because you can learn the technical stuff pretty easily. There's all sorts of methods out there between books and courses and Pluralsight and YouTube videos and whatever your learning style is, there's a way to accommodate it. It's just knowing how to learn and how to absorb new knowledge quickly and how to apply that knowledge is what's going to set you apart. And there's a really good book on it I read a couple months ago. I can't think of the name of it right now.
So great reference.
And I bring the bad questions.
But it's about that concept of, the softer, skills, the more critical thinking skills versus the hard technical skills.
You look very intrigued to answer down there.
Well, I was just, I feel like Sean just outed my liberal arts education, but okay. I think, like, we focus too much on having the certification or having a degree. And I think traditional education is very important. but I don't think it's important that you necessarily have a college degree or a master's degree or a PhD. It's about having the skill set. So for example, kind of goes back to communication. If you cannot clearly verbalize or write in a clear and concise manner, right? So if you don't have those basic skills, then it's gonna be harder. It's gonna be harder for you. So it's not about necessarily getting a college degree and having that, but about having a basic education.
What you go through to get the degree
Yeah.
is the part that matters.
I mean, I look at like my niece and my nephew, and my niece is always just like, ugh, I'm just gonna take this class to do this because I have to fulfill this requirement and do that. And I'm like, kid, it's about learning what your STEM class is teaching you, not getting the credit. We kind of focus on the wrong thing, I think, a lot of the time.
So I have 2 of those degrees. Don't do that. I have 2 of those degrees. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Don't do that.
I have both also.
I mean, the thing is, all of the things, at least from a distinct technical standpoint that you learn in college, gone in like 5 years, right? But coming back to Rebecca's point, it's learning what's in there and learning how to learn. Being able to sit down and actually choke down a database class when you don't really care about databases. Those sorts of things are important.
So if somebody is currently already in the workforce, people watching this, you're saying taking the time to go now to go to school to go get your bachelor's would or would not be worth it?
Well,
So can I answer that question? Because I was in that
care
situation.
which one of you answers.
10 years in, the network engineer making pretty decent money, went into my manager's office. There was a managerial position open. And again, this is one of those minority teen answers. You say, I really want this job. And he said, you know what, Keith, besides this just not being a good world for you, I'm going to give you some painful but good advice. He said, I don't know if you've noticed, and I didn't notice until that time, you're black.
Surprise.
Really?
One, that explained a lot up to that point for me. And then 2, he said, you need to take
I didn't
away
even know.
every excuse for why you can come into my office, ask for this job, and not get this job. So it was 2 practical things that I learned from that. One, you're absolutely right. You can acquire all these skills without a traditional college degree, college program. However, there's artificial roadblocks, whether you're a minority or a majority. There's these HR policies. You know, you cannot become a PwC consultant without a college degree, period. You can't become a Lockheed Martin systems engineer without a college degree, period. I invested over $100,000 getting both my undergrad and master's. Regret nothing. I would not be on this stage without it.
I'm the same on that. I wouldn't go back on getting even my master's even at all. My bachelor's has nothing to do with tech at all, but at least my master's is an MBA, so it was the business side of it and the soft skills.
I would say, though, that there's now, as somebody who graduated college not that long ago, it's very, very expensive. I'll just say that right now. And that's my hesitation on pushing people to go do more than one degree or even do a degree in the first place.
Sure.
I think there's a level of communication skills that you can get without diving that deep. But I would also love to see HR policies like you're referring to start to fall in terms of why people need to have bachelor's degrees or master's degrees in order to hold certain roles, because it's not true. Especially if you can't judge somebody who's got 10 years of experience on your team saying, I want that role. You don't have a degree, sorry. I've proven everything you need. Why can't that happen? That's the sort of thing that's where I'm coming from on it.
Yeah. So you live in the cert world. What do you think as far as for traditional versus certs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess my number one thing I would say is go take an official VMware course, selfishly. But no, in reality, I guess it all depends on your situation. I mean, college is so expensive these days. And if you're already in a position where you are trying to move up, what I would encourage you to do is before you start forking out the money for that education, he's absolutely right. If you work for Lockheed Martin, you can't get there without that degree. There's no way. So it all depends on your environment. But if you work for some other organization, think about the amount of time and effort and money you're going to put into college and say, what if I were to take that same time and effort and put that into differentiating myself at my job, and make that investment of, no, it's never a popular thing to say, putting that extra time into my work where I'm already at, you know, to show that I can differentiate myself from the crowd, you know, and that might even be, you know, it's different for every situation, I would say, but college is just so expensive these days that I think there are just so many avenues to learn that if you don't have to demonstrate a particular degree to move up, then there's probably other ways to make that happen.
Sean, you got something?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, a degree is a piece of paper. It says I completed so many credit hours to show my mastery of, my basic mastery of whatever the subject is, based on whatever the curriculum was. And it's a certified thing that's, you know, credentialed by an organization that says, yes, I learned something and I was able to graduate, right? It's not necessarily about what the piece of paper is, although for some organizations that's very important. I think what it is more, it's more about what you pick up along the way. You know, and to go back to AJ's point here, you said you probably wouldn't recommend going to college. I would agree with you from a technical course standpoint, right? There's a lot of technical courses. When I graduated college in 2005, they were obsolete 2 years after I graduated. You know, there was some common terminology I was able to take out that was able to help me communicate with other people in the organization. So like the database class was helpful for talking to database people to a point, because it's all high-level concepts in class. But what was really useful was the things like the business courses, you know, having to take accounting and marketing and writing classes, and even things like English Lit, where, you know, there's more to it than just technical stuff. There's more business skills. There's more soft skills. So if you're at a point in your career where you're thinking, okay, I want to move out of being a technical person, you know, maybe a 4-year degree is not the right path, but look at, there's 2-year colleges. You know, if you want to grab business skills, you can go take classes there. You can go spend time shadowing your accounting people. You know, there's other methods to learn business skills and learn in particular, your business processes than just getting a 4-year degree.
So Rebecca, and then I think he has one too, as soon as you're done.
At the end of the day, if you want to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, if that is a goal for you,
go do it.
Then you do it. That is the entire reason I joined the Marine Corps, was to get a college education. There was no higher patriotic calling. It was, I want to go to college, and that opportunity is not there for me. And that is a goal. And if you set a goal like that, just do it. Don't let anything or anyone stop you.
And to that end, and kind of in the same vein, she went to the Marine Corps to get the college education. A lot of companies offer tuition reimbursement. So if you're already in a position at a company, check into your company's tuition reimbursement and see if there's any opportunity for you to at least get some of that cost back. My brother-in-law just went through an MBA program. They paid for half of it.
They paid for all of mine.
Right.
That's how I got my MBA.
There's a
the
number
company I
of
was
people
working for
I know
paid for the whole thing.
who have full degrees and didn't pay a dime for them because they got into the field, worked their way up, and then said, okay, now I want to go get this degree. Now tuition reimbursement, that sort of thing. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking and you're trying to go get a new degree, or you're trying to change skill sets, look into tuition.
So I got to wrap us up here, coming down. So I'm going to go down. And what's the one skill that each of you think somebody should really work on to try to further their career in the next 6 to 12 months? Something they can do short term before VMworld next year.
Oh boy, I got to go first.
We start on either end.
Start in the middle. I tweeted this advice a couple of weeks ago. If you're thinking, you know what, I'm beyond the point where I need a home lab, but I have a couple of grand in my budget that I usually spend on a home lab, that's weird that in our industry we have a couple of $1,000s to spend on some SS computer equipment in our home. Think, you know what, should I go to a conference like SAP Sapphire or Oracle Open World or Oracle World and experience what business users are talking about versus the lens of IT infrastructure folks? Get a completely different lens of the stuff that I build is used for something down the line that I had no clue what it is, and these types of conferences are eye-opening as far as it gives you a completely different perspective of the value that you bring to the organization.
Okay.
So to build off of what Keith said, I agree, but I'm going to take I want to say go down a different path. Instead of going to like an Oracle or an SAP where you're seeing how others use the technology, dive deeper into your organization. Spend time, talking to the people there, shadowing them, see how they use the technology and understand their processes. Because, you can come back to it and go, okay, hey, here's the problem we're seeing with this application. Here's what the user feels. Here's how we fix it. And then you have a better rapport with the people in your organization and a better understanding of how that technology is really used.
Sure. I guess I'm going to kind of give a wishy-washy answer, but I would say it really depends on what your situation is. And you want to kind of look at your organization, or maybe it's not your organization, but just look where you want to be. And I've always had a 2 to 3 year plan in any job I've been in. This is where I want to get. These are the skills that are going to get me there. And having an accurate, you can put as much work into, which I kind of look at it like digging a hole. Well, if you're digging a hole in the wrong place, that hole's not going to do you any good. You got to have a strong compass as to where you're headed, and then think carefully about what are the skills that are going to get me there. Are they presentation skills? Are they, and then do it in a manner, and this is going to sound like something you might feel like a little bit of a kiss up when you do this, but do it in a manner that's visible to the people that you're looking to impress, because they don't see it that way. From management's eyes, they don't see it as somebody kissing up. It's very hard to know when somebody's kissing up to you, but it's very easy to see when somebody's doing something in a visible manner that's improving their skill set, and it's a hole that you need to fill.
Down to the end, to the last two.
So I would say two things on the technology side of the house. He's giving me a dirty look, so the second answer is now going to make fun of him. So the first answer on the technology side of the house, I would say familiarize yourself with something on the programming side of things. I think it's inevitable. We started talking about systems thinking and systems design. There's no way that at some point in time in the next 5 to 10 years that you're not going to be consuming more APIs, that you're not going to be more focused on creating a singular software fabric across your data center. That's where we're moving to. So no one's asking you to become a software engineer tomorrow, but start learning some of the basics. On the soft skills side of the house, I would say being able to answer things in a short way, because I had a particular VCDX partner that when you would ask a question, for example, justify this design decision, would just go immediately to 300 level. And that's what we naturally do as technologists. So I want to just dig in and get nerdy with you. But that doesn't really answer the question as to why this was the best choice for the business. So if you can practice, if you think kind of answering a question for starting at the 100 level, and then if needed, then go to 200, and then if needed, then go to 300, that's going to save you a heck of a lot of time rather than diving deep and getting into all the nerdy nuts and bolts without actually answering the question of why are we even using this technology to begin with?
So I'm just going to not make Rebecca mad. Step one. What I have a number of people that are on my team that I've more or less started handing tasks to. And that's mostly because what I'm looking to do is, even for myself, is starting to pick up more of the business side of things and actually learning, okay, here's how this actual budget works. Here's how this entire budget process works. Here's what people are actually looking for. This is what they're looking to hear. Here's the direction. And if there isn't a direction, figure out how to go set that. So from an engineer to architect standpoint, if you have a mentor or there's an architect in your organization that you work with, reach out to them and say, hey, can I help? Can I sit down with you and kind of walk through what you're doing? Or kind of sit down and kind of go through the thought process here, because here's what I'm seeing. What do you think? And try to get that feedback as to what they're thinking and how their thought process works. Because sometimes we make decisions not based on technology. We make decisions based on business. Sometimes those decisions are good, and some of them are bad. But a lot of times it's a matter of knowing why you're making that decision, and that is why you sit down and talk with people who are making those decisions, and it helps you understand, okay, next time I need to make a decision, here's what I need to do differently. Or here's how I want to sell this next time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, guys. We need to wrap up for this panel. We'll have about 10 minutes and then start the next panel or so. Oh, but before we do that, are you coming? Is it Rick? Okay, come on up. As we wrap up this one, as you guys know, the only reason we're able to do all these is because of the great sponsors that have helped us along the way. And Veeam has been one of those with us for many years now, for a real long time. So I'm going to turn it over for about 5 minutes here. You need to come over here so you're actually on the camera, though.
Oh, on the camera. Oh, this is a camera.
That's the camera. It's,
All right.
That's not.
I didn't wanna
that's not an Alexa. It's
well,
actually
I mean,
a camera.
Oh, okay, Google. No.
So fancy.
No, just great panel, guys. What a great way to get started with the event. I took some notes, and I'm Rick Vanover from Veeam, and you know we take community really seriously, and I love the cross opinions here. Most of the time, I agreed with all you guys. You know, a couple of head nods, yes. Not a few, not too many, no. But I think when you guys look at VMworld and just the fact that each of you that are here, this is a great opportunity, you know. When we think about our day-to-day lives, our practitioners, whether we're an IT pro, like an end user type, or if we work for a brand of some sort, you know, you look to your left and your right, there's 2, 3, 4, maybe even more colleagues that couldn't make the trip here, right? So this is an opportunity. So, you know, really take good effort to capitalize on it. You know, I know a lot of you are regulars, and I enjoy that, you know, seeing everybody. It's kind of like a homecoming of sorts. And I'll go so far as to say that it's a very long road, but it's a small world, you know, and, you know, network like these individuals advocated to you. But when I think about the value of this opportunity you have, this is where, you know, from a career standpoint, we can do more with what we are doing. And whether it's our day-to-day responsibilities, you know, for me, it's around data protection, backup, and the like. But, you know, you look at how you get to where you are. Is it education? Is it a credential? Is it experience? You know, those were all brought up here. But then there's the X factor, and that's you as an individual. What are you going to do different, bring to the community, bring to your own career? Those are the opportunities that a lot of us don't yet know what those are. So, you know, maybe you'll find it this week. Maybe you'll find it at another event. Maybe you're already working on it. So cheers to that. And I think that when you find that extra element, that extra edge that will really define your IT career, you know, maybe that's an opportunity to push into something new. And so I know that the next content that we have up, correct me if I'm wrong, my disappearing host, is around multi-cloud. Is that right? Yeah, I think it is. I did read the agenda correctly. So, like, you know, I can't underemphasize the cloud. I think that the cloud is, it will be the new computer, if not already. And I talk to enterprises every day that, you know, the A word comes up, one of those 2 A words comes up every single time. So my advice there for what's next around multi-cloud and other matters is just go deeper and further. And, you know, the result is that, and this is what I tell my team, by the way, I tell them, make your work or your result be the natural choice, meaning make your perspective, your expertise, your knowledge, your skill, your script, whatever it is, make it absolutely the best choice for whatever matter it is. So it takes some work to get there, right? So if whatever that next new thing is, maybe it's cloud, maybe it's storage, networking, whatever it is, modern app systems, that's your opportunity. And then the other thing to highlight is, you know, when you look at your career, I've learned a lot about myself in a career, and I hope that everyone else has as well. And what I mean by that is you have to know what you want out of a job. Now, you could say, I want to work with XYZ company. I want to make $1, $2, $3. Oh, hey, Dave. Nice to meet you. I want to do whatever. But you have to be able to cut that into very specific things. Like, for example, myself. I need variety in what I do. I cannot sit and do the same thing every day. I need technical challenges, and I need to work with different people, and I need to have some flexibility. Now, I could probably do that anywhere, but it took me a whole bunch of other places where I didn't have that to learn what I do want. And, you know, if any of you have ever had to hire people, you kind of learn a lot about yourself when you hire other people, which is kind of interesting. So all that being said, be prepared to change. You know, this week might be part of that. I think that whatever that next change is, you know, be ready for it. And the last kind of closing thought is, you know, like Mike said, Veeam's been a sponsor of this for a while. You know, VMUnderground, where the bar gets a little bit more busier because it won't be pay per drink at that point. We're happy to have sponsored that. But if you need something to do on Tuesday night, there's a Veeam party that you can join as well. I tweeted out a link on Friday, but then also if you want, just bug me here at maybe the break. I'll be happy to hook you up with the Eventbrite low registration for that. And you know, by the way, one thing that wasn't done was, you know, for everyone here, let's give a big round of applause for Mike, for Brian Knutson, and then Jim Millard. These three guys, you guys have no clue what it takes to put this together. It's boiling point, it's edge stepping, whatever you want to call it. It's some work, and these guys have done it as long as I've been around VMworld. You guys have been doing it. Yeah. Is this the 10th year? 12. Crazy talk. Anyways, happy to sponsor. Thanks for letting me have a few words, Mike.
Of course. So everybody please give it up for Veeam. Thank him again.
Everybody, welcome to the 2 o'clock panel. We are talking multi-cloud. Stu Miniman. I am an analyst with Wikibon and a host of theCUBE, which is a live video program. We'll be doing 3 days of broadcast here at VMworld. It's my 9th year at VMworld. I actually have been working with VMware since 2002 on my nice little V All-Star card from last year that Rubrik put out. You know, I said I started working with ESX 1.5.2, so hopefully I have a little bit of geek cred, but I'm an analyst, so most of you people say that I don't know anything. That's why I'm moderating, because I'm good at asking questions, and what I really want to do is I want to get my panel talking, and I want to get you engaged. So we're here to give you the best multi-cloud experience that you're going to have this week. So I'll have a couple of questions to get us started, but please jump on in. And good questions. We actually have swag to give you. So Fumula has been so nice to bring some limited edition Microsoft Azure certs. We have stickers. So you will want to ask us questions and get involved, and you will be codified on this lovely video that lots of people will watch after. So just to set up the context, a couple of ground rules. We're talking about multi-cloud. Please don't ask definitional questions about what is or isn't in hybrid and multi-composite and things like that. We've got people, we're going to talk about the reality of what's going on here. So we've got people that have worked as practitioners, we've got end users, we've got people that have been out there and helping. We want to talk about what's really happening out there, what's good, what's bad, and everything out like there. So with that ground rule out of the way, I want my panel to introduce themselves, so I've got something for you. I want your name, tell us what you do, and then also tell me the coolest thing that you're seeing people doing like with this whole cloud thing lately. And just because I'm asking you a question, I'll set it up real quick, so I'll talk for a second. I'll try not to talk too much during this panel, but I've been involved in this cloud stuff since early days. I worked on what we call private cloud first, but dug heavily into the public cloud stuff. Last couple of years, I've been digging into the serverless stuff. And I went to a little serverless conference in San Francisco last month, and I found marketing people that are super excited because they don't need to learn all of the coding stuff. They can actually learn enough to start building application. And they're like, I'm kind of a developer, but I'm not even a coder, but I can do things that I can build without even really needing to know all the underlying stuff, which is really cool, I think. So, Fumula, if you'd start us off.
So I'm also known as Exchange Goddess. In addition to Fumula Schmidt, I work for Microsoft. I'm a cloud advocate, and I'm on week number 5. So I actually came from the customer world. And a cool thing about cloud is that businesses, customers, pretty much they can do anything within a couple weeks. Before, it would take forever to develop an application. Now, like you were saying, wow, I have this idea and I want to, make this application. Within a couple weeks, they're up and running and business is booming. It's amazing from start to finish what businesses can do now with cloud.
Yeah, right. I love that, Fumula. Right. It used to be the line I heard once is, give me $1 million in 12 to 18 months, and I'll build you the Taj Mahal. Well, no, I've got no budget and no time. Can we do something? Yeah. Really cool. Josh.
So my name is Joshua Stenhouse. I'm a technical advisor at Rubrik. Despite the accent, I'm based on the US East Coast. I spent 7 years an end user, working up from climbing behind desks and fixing printers to infrastructure to then technical services in the channel, and then the last 6 years I spent 5 at Zerto and a year and a half since at Rubrik. So I'm about half a year off officially being on the dark side, in my opinion. And I think the cool thing I've seen in the last few years is that I've gone from talking to a lot of organizations where you say the word cloud and they say, we are not touching that, that is not for us, and it's insecure, we can't look at it, to the point now where I'm starting conversations and the customer's saying to me, we want to start using it, we have to start using it, and the best use case is always removing that secondary site, be it for disaster recovery, for off-site copies of backups, and that's my personal mission in this world, is to everyone keep the on-premises VMware that we know and we love and we can manage and has the performance and the low latency, but kill the whole notion of a DR site altogether, a physical one.
Cool. Brian?
So I'm Brian Knutson. I'm a cloud technologist for iLand. So we do essentially cloud services. So infrastructure as a service, DR as a service, backup as a service, amongst a bunch of other things that can be done on top of those. My history, I've been on every side. I've been a customer, I've been a VAR, I've been on the vendor side now for about 4 years, now starting up as a service provider. And I guess for me, I don't know how real cool it is, but for me, the whole DR as a service has always been really exciting to me. When I was on the VAR side, we actually got acquired and got put into a large organization that had a public cloud and stuff. And as soon as I saw that and was building on-premises solutions for customers, I'm like, why not have them replicate to us? We have the infrastructure to do that, and they can just sit there and make us money while they're waiting for their disaster to occur. And customers loved it. I sold it to a couple customers. And so that's really kind of going to be my focus now at iLand, is to focus on that piece of the
Brian,
puzzle.
you left out one of the most important pieces of your CV there. You are also, first of all, it's his first time on a panel, but if it wasn't for Brian and some of the other folks here, we wouldn't be here. So thank you once again, VMUnderground. I'm always happy to be able to support and participate.
Thank you.
All right, David?
My name is David Burton. I work for a large healthcare organization. We are a payer provider in Western Pennsylvania, so not a vendor. Always been a customer. I've been a customer for the last 10 years. So one of the biggest challenges we've seen with bringing hybrid and multi-cloud into our environment is the separation of education between leadership and IT. So challenge number one, make sure you're well educated, because the salesmen coming to talk to executives about what on-premise cloud looks like versus public cloud, there's a huge shift in what your leadership believes about your cloud consumption and what IT believes about it. So knowing your numbers is valuable, knowing what's available is valuable, but also starting rapidly and being able to fail fast, we found also to be extremely valuable. And in our organization, we don't have the luxury of writing our own software. We buy software off the shelf. So we had to figure out how to bring hybrid cloud into our environment and make it financially viable, and that's a challenge. But most importantly, like I said, I think for us, we needed to understand what the executives were hearing and know our numbers and our costs so that everything was clear and wide open, so we had a strategy and an approach.
Thank you. Jim?
I'm Tim Jabut. I'm a solutions architect with VMware. Is this fading in and out? It's okay. Sorry about that. They told me this mic was flaky. So I'm an embedded solutions architect for VMware. I'm actually embedded into IBM, so I'm very familiar with IBM Cloud, as well as their global technology services. Coolest thing with technology or with multi-cloud strategy is there is no one cloud anymore. I mean, customers are setting the requirements and the edicts, the demands, just like they want a two-vendor policy. Most of the large customers, the large enterprise customers, want at least a minimum of a two-cloud vendor policy as well. The key to all of this, the secret sauce, is going to be in software-defined networking, and that's where we add a lot of value. So that's about it.
Thanks, Tim. Great. Yeah, software-defined networking. Come on, Pat Gelsinger said, that networking will be for the next decade or two what, the base virtualization was for VMware for a couple. So Brian actually did a real good job writing a blog post that got me excited to talk about this, this topic in general, because public cloud, remember, swipe a credit card, it's super easy, and if you find today, cloud in general is complex. The joke I've used is, if I was to go build a compute instance on Amazon or build a server on Dell.com, Lenovo, or anything like that, I think Amazon's got more options and probably need to understand a little bit more to do it. So it's complex, and the other thing I'd say is that when you've all been users, I hear that there's a stat, 80% of users now have a cloud strategy. Well, I've talked to a lot of users, and first of all, the strategy, the ink's still drying on it, and it's more, well, they did this, and they did this, and they did this, and we're kind of living with all this. So it's almost like we've redone what we did at the data center with the cloud. So multi tends to be, well, I've got a lot of stuff. So I'm going to want to start down at the end. Tell us, what are the this thing that we have called multi-cloud, either your environment or if you're working with customers, what are you seeing? What are the real challenges that they're having with this thing that they ended up with? I hear things like cost or things like that, but just whatever is, what's some of the biggest challenges that they have because they've got this stuff?
Expectations, customers' expectations. The problem is there's so much misinformation out there. Customers have this expectation that cloud is easy. Well, yeah, if you want to stand up a single VM on Amazon, Google, you name, pick your flavor. Pumala and I were talking earlier. I mean, I stood up an Azure VM last night on the flight from 36,000 feet. Setting up a single VM is easy. Linking it all together, tying in governance, compliance, automation, and orchestration of all your entire tool chain, that's where the real value is, and that's where it's difficult.
All right. Do you want to jump in, please?
Yeah.
We don't need to go up and down the line.
With
So
multi-cloud, so if you've got multiple clouds, you want those clouds to talk to each other. And I strongly believe customers are having that. That's the pain point. How do we get all these clouds to talk to each other? Because they should, just like your business. If you have different business units, you should all talk and collaborate. Those systems should all be able to tie into each other and work collaboratively to get to that end result. So as a multi-cloud environment, you want to find solutions that can make that chatter along the network talk, if that's the right word. The automation portion of how do we get all our clouds to talk to each other?
Wait, you're not saying Kubernetes, Istio, all that stuff, Silver Bullet, solve all those things?
All that stuff is great, but at the end of the day, we want all the clouds to talk to each other. When you're in an enterprise, it doesn't matter where the clouds are at. Honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is the end result, that application, that service. The person sitting at the computer just cares about that report that's spitting out to them.
Yeah, look, Brian brought up even, data protection, not the sexiest of things. We've got some cool companies doing stuff in that space, but
very cool.
Cloud, it can be a real problem if you don't do this right.
Yeah, and part of the problem is that there are so many and they are so different, and trying to get them to work. I consider Office 365 in an environment and some Amazon stuff in an environment a multi-cloud environment. And there may be reasons that they need to talk to each other directly. And that may be something that a company has come up on and they're the first ones to have to solve that problem. And they may have to code something and put something into place and ensure the governance and the communication, all that kind of stuff as well, to make sure that those can work properly. And a lot of it, Tim mentioned the software-defined networking aspect of things. That's huge. That is why that is so big, is because of this multi-cloud and trying to get all these different pieces to work together, having that software-defined networking to be able to connect them together and be able to understand how the traffic's moving around without having to understand the underpinnings of, well, it's bouncing around to this data center, through these routers all around here to get where it's going.
Well, and Stu brought up too, you had mentioned Istio, and yes, Istio and Envoy, those are definitely very good future technologies, but we've got to get to an all-kube world for that to really take place. I don't know about anybody else, but all these enterprise customers, maybe 5 to 10% are actual cloud-native apps or born on the web. How many companies are born on the web, right? If you start talking Istio, you're talking layer 4 through 7. So many legacy customers are way below that, and they've got thousands of applications through mergers and acquisitions that you're talking a decade of redevelopment time.
Thank you. I want to put a pin in applications for a second, because that's the whole reason.
That's a whole other thing.
Data and applications, kind of the whole reason infrastructure is here. But just David, Joshua, do you want to comment more on what we were putting a bow on that last
I want to talk
conversation?
about something that was, I guess, not take my IT geek hat off for a moment and comment about operationally what kind of impact it has on people. We found that without people interested and passionate about developing and working in hybrid cloud space, we really had struggles. We actually had to seek out in our organization people who wanted to work in a public cloud space, people who were excited to shift. So we had to find champions within our organization who were willing to adjust, and that helped quite a bit. We found the engineers who wanted to work on the technology and the application owners and vendors who were willing to partner with us, and that allowed us to kind of compartmentalize small pockets of IT and areas of staff that really wanted to work and accelerate getting into a hybrid cloud model. We also, one of the other big challenges we had was a lot of our executives thought it was a button push. Just just hit the button and move our
They
services
always
to the
do.
cloud. So we tried to build that perception by offering a very small button and starting small, allowing us to fail quickly and identify what was needed. One of our initial strategies was separation of the infrastructure as a service away from platform as a service, because creating a new email account could definitely give us a, hey, you have a cloud service now. There's a button. It doesn't mean you necessarily need to go build 1,000 servers and lay down applications at the same time, because there can be different strategies between your application cloud services versus your infrastructure cloud services. So trying to separate executives and give them enough education to know what IT is doing was a huge help for us.
And the one thing I'd add there is, for me, it comes down to what is the most appropriate use case for using cloud for that technology. And a great example for me, if I go back to 2008, I looked at a SaaS-based or cloud-based service before anyone even used the term. And it was Mimecast email filtering that did 7-year retention, and they filtered it in their cloud service before it was then forwarded to your on-premise Exchange server, without even knowing I was consuming the cloud, and really just changing some MX records. I was now using a cloud service and had a cloud strategy, as it were, without actually making any wholesale changes to my environment. It just plugged in and go. And I think that for a lot of traditional enterprise IT environments is the way to go. You're not going to rewrite all your applications. You're not going to lift and shift and have them all networked in the cloud. You've got to take the small things bit by bit until you've got this truly hybrid environment.
All right, I'm pulling, as I said, we've got swag, giveaways for some good questions here. I'll keep asking. I'll get them talking amongst themselves, too, if we don't have any. But
Can I ask a question and get swag?
Please, Brian. Am
I
I allowed
don't
to
have
answer
one.
then?
I just want to know.
Please.
I'll think of one.
Oh, okay.
I don't have one right
I
now.
thought you had a question.
Oh, okay.
No.
You just
I
want
just
to
want to know
you
if it's worth thinking
yeah,
of a question.
Sure. But Brian, this we can break the fourth wall. We can all ask questions of each other. It's all good. So we've talked about applications. I heard like cloud native, and I want to get your take on how this kind of the changing application. Applications are changing. We're going to microservices and all this stuff and everything. But at the same time, most enterprises have hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. I said actually Microsoft did us all a favor. They're pushing everybody to Office 365 as hard as they can. That was a green light to everyone that say SaaS as much as you can. If my business application of Microsoft there, green light. But still, this is what I call the long pole in the tent. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to still talk about our applications. What are we lifting and shifting? What are we moving? So when we think about multi-cloud, how does this application journey, what are you seeing? What's working? What's not? Is lift and shift a good thing?
I don't think lift and shift is a good thing. That's just from personal experience working in the customer world. It's very painful. You can lift and shift and you're like, oh crap, now I got to fix because everything is broken. Slow migrations just seem to be the better way to go in the long run because you're not constantly putting
if I can, let me throw one more thing on top. What about like the VMware on AWS or things like that? Is that part of this whole application migration? Do I put it there? Because like my take is like lift and shift. If step one is lift, shift, and then I need to refactor and start pulling things apart, you can modernize the platform and then modernize the application, which I can do in my data center. There's many paths to get there.
It depends.
So, yeah.
It depends on your organization, your business requirements, your needs, and how fast you actually need to get to the cloud. If you've got certain circumstances that, okay, my data center is going to shut down, I need to move everything out. Okay, then lift and shift is probably it. Or you have an application that is 20 years old. You don't know who the developer is anymore. They may have died.
Wait, that Windows NT thing that I shoved in a VM long ago and it's still running?
Yeah. The legacy payroll system that still runs, and once a year somebody goes in it. It's stuff like that where you're like, okay, what time frame do I have? If you have some time, you may want to do that migration, but if you're stuck in a crunch, you may need to do the lift and shift. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
We've seen lift and shift actually, it's got to be a strategy, right? I mean, it's got to be something that is driven. We've had some joint IBM customers, for instance, who wanted to get out of the data center business. They didn't want their own data center anymore at all. They didn't want to purchase new hardware when they were coming up on the end of their amortization time frame for their current hardware. It was the easiest thing to do was lift and shift to the cloud. What they ended up happening as a byproduct of that is they were running on 4 or 5-year-old hardware. When they moved it to the cloud on new next-gen hardware, their applications sped up orders of magnitude. Not a single line of code was modified.
Yeah, and those of us that have been around through the whole virtualization flip, you know, that's a pretty big deal, and I think we're coming up on an equally big pivot point with this. I, as a customer, went through and I literally wrote out a spreadsheet of all of the applications we had in our environment, and I said, which ones make sense to lift and shift from a physical to a virtual, P2V? Which ones make sense for us to completely redo? You know, maybe we need to reconsider this package that we're using because it's been there for 5-10 years, nobody knows how to manage it, so maybe we need to replace the functionality of the application itself. And then somewhere in between there's maybe we need to refactor that Exchange server because it needs, you know, we know that there's a better way to do it because of the 3 upgrades we've done have put us in a completely different version of Exchange. So I think it's important to not assume that everything should lift and shift or everything needs to go cloud native. It's a matter of going through and figuring out what each of the different pieces are doing, and if it can benefit. You know, I may get a 10% increase by simply moving that SQL Server to the cloud, but I may be able to get a 25% increase by shifting the code around and doing something different with it and writing it in a cloud native way.
Right, but that's a much larger transformative process, right? I mean, it's so you know, if the question is lift and shift or rewrite the code, I think everybody would love to go cloud native, but the reality is
it's not easy.
It's a very long road.
Yeah, for sure.
Question out here.
Please.
All right. So the question for those that didn't hear it is: are there things that scare you away from the cloud? And the thing I'd say is, of course, multi-cloud, and does include private cloud and things like that. But yeah, please, welcome.
I've got one. You know, I saw somebody trying to move Exchange into EC2 instances. Like,
Are you for real?
I'm for real. I'm for real.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't do that around me.
Yeah. They said because they couldn't manage their own encryption keys in Office 365. Sorry.
Wow.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And I mean, how many of us actually think that Office 365 is just Exchange with a pretty interface on front of it? They didn't just lift and shift Exchange.
That's all I know about it, and it seems to work.
That's all we should know about it. We should just assume that
You
it's
don't want to
that.
know any more about it.
There was a fear for my company. Can you guys hear me?
No.
No? Low battery. Low battery.
Tech support. Tech support.
Executives came and said, we need you to lift and shift and save money while you do it. and the numbers didn't add up. The lift and shift, they said these need to be on, these infrastructure, these Windows and Linux servers need to be moved off of on-premise on the equipment that you already own to the cloud, and I need you to save money in the process. And it was impossible to do that. So that was a fear. What we did to compensate was find the workloads that are transient. So the lift and shift for us was, no, we're not going to move what we already have built. We're going to take the workloads that make it very difficult for us to maintain in the data center, the ones that are coming and going. They last for 30 days, 90 days. We know they're going to be short-lived, and maybe they can even be powered off at night and on weekends. And we don't have to pay for them like we would on site. We were able to satisfy executives by lifting and shifting some of our development workloads that prevented our on-premise capacities from fluctuating, which caused production impact, and moved those to the cloud, made our executives happy, saved us some. Most of our focus was on the PaaS services, but for IaaS, we were able to satisfy that. So the scariest thing is when an executive asks you to do something that's not right.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Consume that.
You've got Dilbert comics to show them, and like hello outsourcing. Do we remember what a mess that was for everyone? But yeah, I love FUD, you know, or fear, or you know, what's
who
the,
actually
you know,
thinks
bad
that cloud is
expectation?
cheaper? I mean, the reality of it. I mean, who actually thinks that it's cheaper?
I do, and actually
Please.
I'll link it back to the previous use case. You know, the number one use case for lift and shift is a disaster, because you go from needing zero compute, RAM, horsepower in a DR site in IOPS to now you've got to run all of your VMs. And that's why the cloud was created in the first place, for that burst capacity that they then leased out. DR is the #1 burst capacity lift and shift use case. And in that circumstance, the cloud, every TCO I've done does save money, because whatever you're paying for on-premises infrastructure in 2 sites, just cut it in half.
So
I'll give you that one.
well,
Yeah.
I want to
but
highlight.
here. So our panel's about multi-cloud. So here's the question: Amazon says you should do everything on them because if you won't have the buying leverage if you start splitting up. We all know with every vendor, the more you do with them, in theory, you should get discounts and everything like that. So we could talk public cloud versus on-prem, but multi-cloud, cost, security, data protection, don't all those things become tougher? When I'm spreading my chips all over the table, I'm not going to get as big of a bang? How does multi-cloud fit into this discussion that we're having about fear, uncertainty, cost?
It's more complex.
I'm sorry?
It's definitely more complex.
Yeah.
And I really don't think there's going to be no expert that knows about every single cloud. I mean, just the complexity. You're going to have different departments. You're going to have your AWS department. You're going to have your Azure department. You're going to have your Google. You're going to have your IBMs. And then those teams need to get together and they need to talk. And we all know how companies run. Sometimes we don't always talk.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they're silos.
Right.
And things are going to break down. And it's one of those
We-
things where if
it-
you're going to have
are we
multi-cloud.
rebuilding the silos? We had storage expertise and
Yes.
network
Yeah.
expertise, and
Absolutely.
I knew this type of blade server well, and now I have to have my GCP, my Azure, my AWS.
So your experts, your departments are now going to have to talk to each other and say, what are you doing in your cloud? Here's what I'm doing in my cloud. Let's make sure we're doing stuff, at the same rate, so we're not, competing against each other.
Joshua, put you on the spot. You've got solutions that span across all these.
Yep.
What are you seeing out there? Is it you're seeing a lot of differences? We
you know,
don't
if-
have a commodity or utility from cloud.
So a couple of things. If I had $100 for every time I've spoken to a customer and they've said, I'm looking at both or I'm using them both, then I probably wouldn't need to be here. I'd just sit on an island somewhere. And then the other thing I'd say is, the likes of any cloud vendor, especially like an Amazon saying, put it all in with us, you'll have more leverage. Even if you spent a reasonable amount of money, like say $1 million a year with Amazon, in comparison to some of their SaaS customers, that is peanuts. It's a rounding error. It doesn't actually give you any leverage whatsoever. And when you get to that sort of scale for running your actual infrastructure, then it does make more sense to, over a 3 or 5 year TCO, to bring that back on premises anyway. But I generally see people stick to around 1 or 2, because you can go crazy. You can go 5, 6, 7, 8. It's usually 1 or 2 for multiple different use cases, and quite often it's, most customers, it's Office 365, Azure AD, Azure for the infrastructure team, and then Amazon for the new next-gen apps from the developers.
What about Salesforce?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, everybody's got Salesforce.
Yeah, that's cloud.
For
What
any-
about
SaaS.
ServiceNow?
Oh,
Yeah.
so
So that technically
And
that's
then,
cloud.
and
all
I've got
those
that
need to
that
talk.
cool data application that I'm doing in Google because nobody else
CRM?
has smarter
Yeah,
things there.
there's some,
Yeah,
don't get me
but
wrong,
yeah.
there's some others there, but the interesting thing is if you go and work for a startup, the startups that I've worked for the last 2 years don't use any on-premises VMs.
Right.
It's all SaaS-based and in the cloud, yet we're selling these solutions for the legacy apps.
All right.
I think part of the,
Hold on,
the
David, did you have
multi-cloud
a comment
strategy.
there? I just wanted you to jump in there if you had a comment.
Me?
No, David. No.
Oh, David.
Did you?
I always have a comment.
Please. Go on, and we do have a question from the audience after, but go ahead and give your 2 cents here on the multi-cloud and challenges. And
Yeah, a lot of challenges. I think where we see a lot of issues for us is, I guess, understanding the quantity and use cases that public cloud can be consumed. I think actually, to be honest, I don't remember the context of the original question. Help me out. What were you I phased out a little bit. What were you guys talking about? I had a hard time hearing you, actually.
It's so just hybrid cloud and the context for using it and how many you should use and why and what complexities does that introduce.
wouldn't it be simpler just to use one?
Yeah.
One cloud to rule them all?
We chose to do that, but what we found was some of the software development areas, they wanted to go off and do their own thing. And they decided to go play with Google, and they decided to go play with AWS. But our security teams had a different idea of what they wanted to do. So like you had stated, we had to start splitting up and make each technology group that's doing their development in their own public cloud to come up with their own infrastructure team. and their own security groups and their own level of education. And guess what happened a year later? They came back to corporate IT and said, we can't do this. We want to move to the cloud platform you're running on. So they learned. It was very difficult. And this was over the last 2 years. They spent a year hiring people, developing expertise on AWS, and then some of their division wanted to move to Google. And corporate IT had moved to Azure. And so we had split across all three. And one of their groups did. It was too complex. They couldn't continue to manage. And they wanted to come back to corporate IT. And the expertise that was developed, and we did. We decided as a corporate IT to stick with one public cloud provider.
Your story is very reminiscent of my previous employer, healthcare, insurance company. We did sort of the same thing. You know, we had AWS, we had some stuff out from Google, and then infrastructure teams had Azure.
But I think a lot of it is going to be driven as well from the services that you're choosing to incorporate as well. For, you know, we'll take Watson Cognitive Services, for instance. If you're embedding Watson Cognitive Services, you know that you have to leverage IBM's cloud. You can't go to another provider. Same thing if you're using Route 66 for DNS. You've got to use Amazon. I mean, it's the service offerings that your developers choose to leverage is going to dictate the clouds that you have to be on.
Okay. Question from the audience. Thank you.
Well, one thing we haven't mentioned, of course, is lock-in. There's a certain large, like AWS, where UK broadcast has a large amount of data inside AWS, can't move away because the cost of the egress.
Data gravity. And
so are there other clouds that have other lock-ins, and why don't we consider the cost of getting back on-prem, moving to another cloud? Because the whole point is you've got multi-cloud, you should be able to move sideways. If you've got lock-in, how do you move? So are there other cloud providers that have the same sort of lock-in?
So if I could only hear bits and pieces, sound like data movement and the costs of that.
And cloud lock-in.
Yeah, and lock-in.
Vendor lock-in in general, especially if you start building a life cycle around the APIs and automation of each infrastructure cloud that you're orchestrating with. It's a challenge for your dev shops to move from cloud to cloud, and a challenge for your IT shops.
Yeah, my company, we've got a development team, and they're like, I love my Amazon stuff. I don't want to have to report that code and do that everything. I mean,
Terraform. Sorry, I got to put a plug in there.
Yeah.
Terraform.
Right.
It works with all the clouds, and it can talk.
But data movement's tough and expensive. So
it is.
I mean, yeah, we could spend another hour talking about. We just put out a big report talking that 90% of the data will never leave the edge, because that's where it is and that's where it'll process. And even Amazon's pushing that way. Google, Microsoft, everybody understands that. But
isn't that the cost of running multi-cloud?
Data moving.
Isn't that the cost of running multi-cloud? I mean, that's the price that you pay when you have multi-clouds.
Yeah, and I think this ties into bits and pieces we've talked about before on. It's important to really analyze what you're doing and making sure you know what you're doing before you make that leap into the cloud, so that you don't have to try to pull everything out and move it somewhere else again. Going into it with eyes wide open, really thinking about the TCO aspect of things before you do anything, so that you know what it's going to cost. And if there's advantages or disadvantages to that, the organization can discuss that and understand that properly, and also know, hey, if we do make a mistake, what's the cost to pull back from that, or to DR to somewhere else. Again, when we think about DR is about moving data. And that should be a part of any solution you put together. What are we going to do if Amazon goes down? You could say Amazon never goes down, but we all know better. And what are we going to do in that case? Well, that may be your migration if something doesn't work the way you expect it to, and you need to understand what those costs are going to be in either case.
Brian, it's your fault for not architecting your application properly to be able to deal through that, right?
Well, yeah, I'll take that responsibility for everybody.
I agree with you, though. I think it's the cost of cloud. You have to decide as an organization, and as you're working through application development and cloud, I guess the distribution of your applications across your clouds, data locality is significant. Latencies need to be understood. You can't develop the application on one platform and have your storage on another and expect performance to be consistent. It needs to be well thought out.
And just to add to that, sorry, there are cloud providers that don't charge egress, and cloud connectivity options to public clouds that remove egress charges. So it is just something that could come down to contractual or networking considerations.
Wait, planning. I mean, you really need to know what you're getting yourself into. You got to plan it, and you also need to know why you're getting into it. just because somebody read something in CIO magazine and said, "Oh, the cloud's great. We need to move everything," but why? I mean, why are you doing it? Is there going to be a cost savings for you, or is there going to, what's the value in this?
So we're getting close to the end, so I want to make sure if there's questions in the audience that we get to them. But otherwise, we're at VMworld this week, and cloud changes a bunch of things. We talked about a bunch of pieces, but how does it affect put your end user hat on for those of you that are there or used to be there, your relationship with your vendors that you've worked with a while. I would love if you want to talk specifically about VMware, that's great. But in general, who's helping in this environment? Who needs to do more in this environment? Where do you turn to for this? Brian will give a good plug for iLand, I'm sure. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll start since you called me out.
Yeah.
A lot of it, when it comes to vendor management, we're used to having that sales rep. We know who to go to. We can go to that sales engineer and we can be like, I need some help and I need some technical help. Can you at least connect me with the right person if you don't know? Well, when we go to AWS, we go to Google, we may not have that level of relationship anymore. And that, again, that's part of that planning. It's part of understanding how much do we really need to have that level of contact. And that can help you decide which cloud provider to go with. Maybe for those transient type workloads, put that out in AWS as transient. If it goes away, we can spin it up somewhere else because we've kind of got it built to go wherever we need it to go. Today, it's cheapest to go to AWS, but maybe it's going to be Google next time. I don't need to talk to a sales rep for that. But maybe in other cases, I want to have somebody that's more running a cloud that's more of a higher touch, meaning I've got a phone number I can call and get to a person. I'm not being expected to log a ticket and then have some magical computer in the background figure it out and shoot you an email at the end on how to fix it. So that's definitely a part of the choice is when it comes to vendor management. You also pick VMware or Microsoft based on, partially based on the technology, but also on the people that you have to deal with. Should I go HPE or Dell? Well, some people make the decision because Dell takes them to more sushi lunches. It's a horrible reason to make a choice, but I've seen it. It happens.
I've seen that too. And the other thing I'd add to that is, let's be honest here. I'm not bashing Amazon, but if you call Amazon and say, I can't access this S3 storage, they don't really give a crap.
Can you call them?
If you can't.
Their website says, we don't have a phone number, please click
All
here.
right, so you can't even call them, even better. Whereas if you call a managed cloud provider who relies on your business and is in a smaller size, then they're at the perfect point where they've got the in-house skills, they've seen all the problems, they're proactively managing and troubleshooting it, and they actually care and can solve it, and you've got a contractual obligation, therefore, to get that fixed. So not plugging iLand specifically, any cloud provider of that size, but that's, for me, where I'd look to use that sort of space is for that contract, for somebody who can held liable in the event of it not working.
Yep.
Azure. That's all I got to say.
I guess. I guess.
Wait. Is that Azure Stack, Office 365?
All
which,
of it.
yeah.
Well,
yes.
think about
Xbox, free Xbox for everyone, I heard, no?
I wish. But think about it. Most people have enterprise agreements.
Yeah.
If you've got an issue with your Microsoft product, you're getting on the phone or you send an email to your TAM. And if something doesn't get resolved, it keeps getting escalated and escalated. When you have somebody like Microsoft, you can go to somebody and, at least get a voice and say, okay, we're working on it, or it's a bug or a feature. Yes, you can giggle with that. But there is somebody you can go to, where sometimes some of the cloud providers, like you said, it's just a button and, we're experiencing a problem.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that, Microsoft Cloud is perfect.
But they have a field.
It's easier, yeah.
They have a field. There's people in the field that you can talk to, definitely.
I agree. And I'll just
David.
One thing, I've used Microsoft Cloud Support, and they did call me within 3 minutes of raising a ticket. So
wow.
On the customer
that's
end,
faster than my teenagers. That's impressive.
I guess we've had all of those experiences. There's times when our customers need a different level of service. There's times when we've had to take workloads out of the public cloud and bring it back on premise because the support wasn't there. The wrong application got moved. The level of availability for the application wasn't designed appropriately. And when a cloud provider decided to do maintenance, mandatory maintenance, the application went down because they moved inadvertently and realized that the level of availability of the public cloud wasn't at a micro infrastructure level. It was at a macro level, but the application wasn't distributed in such a way that it could sustain that kind of availability. So the conversations you got earlier about moving data, ingress and egress of data, we evaluated that very early and decided to sign up with a Microsoft Express route, for example, that prevented our costs to egress, which saved us a ton of cash because there were times that we had to move move workloads off-prem, and then we did have to move it back on for reasons of the customer made an oops. So it is very important to get that, understand that ahead of time before petabytes of data start shifting. So.
Yeah.
I think service, the customer service of your providers is a really big key. It's great if the cost is, it's going to be cheap. But what about the customer service? What if you have a problem? How long is it going to take? Is it going to take 3 minutes, 3 hours, or 24 hours? I mean, all that comes into play when you're deciding where you're going to go.
And
because you're going to go.
Sorry, the last thing, I don't think I actually answered your question, which is this is VMworld, and what should you be looking at?
Yeah.
So I think my opinion on this is that, of all the different technologies here and everything that VMware is doing, anything that is being refreshed or put into a data center in 2018 onwards has to have cloud integrated to the point where it's just a couple of clicks and you can get data there, you can pull it back, and you can view and manage it all from the same control plane that you have for your on-premises infrastructure as you do the cloud. It should live and breathe the same, and it doesn't matter whether you're even using the cloud today for that task. The point is that you can extend it to that in the future when you next are asked, okay, we need to reduce our spend, we need to use the cloud more, we need digital transformation. Oh, great, I just did it for this, this, and this. So that's my core focus on what are all these technologies doing to enable cloud, and also the nuance. The devil's always in the detail. Like, yes, I have cloud, but wait, how do I do that? I've got to put a whole new rack of kit in there and buy a cloud license to tier the data off. That isn't a cloud-ready solution. That's a hack job.
Any final questions from the audience? All right, I've got one question. I'd ask you to keep it short because we're running low on time. Want to give you one wish. We're going to be back here in a year and going to say, boy, in the last year, multi-cloud got so much better because of this. So, going to give you the one wish.
My wish is that I could use a magic wand and point it at my vendors to make sure that they didn't build applications that weren't able to be distributed. Forcing our application vendors to distribute their applications to make them more resilient so that they could be moved on-premise or off and be able to sustain that kind of shift is huge. I'm a customer. I buy thousands of different applications, and some of those vendors don't shift. They don't have a proper vision, and I'm handcuffed by the limitations that they put me under. I'd like to wave that wand at them. That's what I want.
And you're going to smack them in the head, it looks like, too. But, yeah.
Yeah, and that, I guess, I'm going to actually add a different one in mind, but I'm going to play off that because you made me think of another one that I think is potentially difficult, which is, we talked about it before, is that people really actually understand that there are multiple clouds. They do different things. There are advantages and disadvantages across all of them, and that every level from us IT people down in the trenches all the way to those CEOs, CTOs, CFOs that are putting these requirements down on us, will really go into it with an open mind, I guess, be better educated about what the different clouds are, what your choices are in the cloud. It's not just Amazon, it's not just Azure, it's not just GCP. There are other options out there. They may not be as big and huge, but that doesn't make them a worse choice. It just means that they're different. They offer something different. And that, the cost, it's the amount I pay for this server versus the amount that I'm paying for 3 years in any given cloud may not be the same, but what's the total TCO across all that? What all do we gain or lose in both cases?
My one wish for next year is every single cloud Luddite in the world to retire. And a Luddite, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, cloud.
But you're not a Luddite, though. You like new technology. You're ready to embrace it. And there's still far too many conversations where it's we can't embrace the cloud in any shape or form. And you look at the new agile companies out there where if you said, do you want to buy this server, they'd say, what's a server? They're running all in cloud. They don't have an IT department. My wife works for a company with 100,000 customers and not a single VM, not a single EC2 instance, and only one person in IT for laptops. We got to kill the cloud Luddites.
Yeah, and just
oh no, sorry, make them retire. Kills harsh.
Yeah, quick story, just because last year at this show, I talked to a pretty large enterprise user, and he said, I've got my data center group, and they don't want to look at cloud. They don't want to talk about it. When I went to them and said VMware and AWS, they're like, oh, we can do that because it's VMware. And that was he's like, now they're in the cloud, and well, a data center co-located, all that stuff. It's cloud-ish. But at least they were there, just as Microsoft really helped enable a lot of this SaaS. I think VMware Cloud is going to help move a lot of people towards cloud movement. All right, give us the last wish.
My wish is better integration between the clouds.
Yeah.
Yep.
Have the clouds talk better to each other and on premises, because I don't want to say you're always going to have on premises, but someone's always going to have that presence there. So if you can all talk together, your applications, your business is going to be better.
All right. Well, please give all the panelists a big hand for participating. Thank you so much, everybody. And we're going to have VMware vSAN. You've got it.
Yep. Yeah. VMware vSAN is going to speak for a little bit this year. And VMware vSAN came in this year as one of those presenting sponsors. So I want to introduce Ken to everybody and give him a couple minutes to kind of talk about their product, and at the end we'll congratulate and thank them for their support. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, it's actually just a real pleasure to be able to offer that sponsorship to the community. I think that this is such a phenomenal event where we get that opportunity to mix and mingle and talk with other peers. And I think particularly, I am going to plummet off of this podium here, I guarantee it. It's fantastic for us to have that opportunity, particularly the products like vSAN coming along. We don't often get that opportunity to talk to customers. These are new and emerging technologies, so having experts within the industry being able to do this sort of communication with each other is just a fantastic opportunity. So thank you for that. So I am Ken Warneberg. I manage the technical marketing group for our storage and availability business unit. And really, we have these few chances to be able to get other people within the industry to take that time to work with each other. vSAN is in a state that reminds me of vSphere probably 12 years ago when I joined VMware. At the time, it was taking off. vSphere was, well, it didn't exist at the time. ESX was doing really well, and GSX was starting to sunset. But the growth of those platforms at that time had nothing really to do with corporate directions. It's not like we sat there and took CIOs out for timeshares and gave them cigars and things like that. It was the community that was using ESXi that said, this product set is fantastic, we need to do more of this. And it was really a groundswell sort of an approach to get those technologies going. vSAN's in the same spot today. We've got 15,000 customers, and that's fantastic. It's a huge growth that we're experiencing, but it's still a very young product set. This is something that's 5 years old. We've only had a very few real iterations on this. It's version 6.7 today, but it's not something that has been around for 30 years like the rest of the storage industry has. So it's really the community at this point that is driving the charge of that product set. And 15,000 may sound like a lot, but even if every one of those customers was here at VMworld, there's still 10,000 people that have never seen it before in their lives. But we have people like AJ, who was on the first panel up there. He's running vSAN. He lives it day and night. So it's a very important opportunity to be able to talk to people that have those experiences. So back to the point, I appreciate the ability to offer the sponsorship for this event because we get those opportunities to talk with people. And I think it's even more important, one of the comments that was made in the last panel session here was that we see a change in roles, that people's roles are shifting in IT, particularly in the cloud space. We're breaking down the silos between the different technology stacks. And I would say that that's the same on-premises in your own data center or in a cloud model or anything. Cloud is really more of an operational thing. It's a model of doing IT. And when we start looking at things like hyperconvergence, we're pulling in network, compute, and storage. So my point is that the traditional vSphere administrator in the future is not going to be a vSphere administrator. He's going to be an SDDC administrator. We're not going to have a network admin and what she knows is the network stack. She's going to have to know everything about all these technologies because this new cloud operational model requires a different skill set than it required when we were managing things just in a traditional legacy sort of a fashion. With hyperconvergence, that blurring is even more, it's a stronger blurring, if that makes any sense, because those roles are no longer fundamentally separate. We're talking about a single stack of technology that anybody who's interacting with it needs to be able to manage. So these opportunities like OpenAX, like VMUnderground, these opportunities to communicate with other people who have these skill sets, to be able to push yourself a little bit beyond your comfort zone is very, very important, because in the future, that's what we're all going to be doing. We're not going to be vSphere administrators. We're not going to be storage administrators. We're going to be cloud operators. And I think that's a very important skill set to be able to get from the people at these events. So once more, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the chance to help out this sort of very important community event, and I appreciate it.
Pleased that we're starting to talk a lot more in the community about what it's like to actually work in IT rather than doing the job, but to actually be a person working in IT, because it's something that we've not been talking about for a very long time. But I've certainly heard this year a lot more discussion of this, the topic, and I was really glad that it was Sonia Cuff, who unfortunately can't be with us at the moment, started out the conversation that we need to talk about these things, that at open source conferences there's a lot of discussion about mindfulness and about self-care, making sure that you don't go completely crazy in this crazy world we live in. And Alicia, who is in the middle of the panel here, who will introduce herself shortly, said, I can help. And that really is what triggered this panel, and I'm really pleased that we've got a collection of people who both have been through IT burnout and maybe are dealing with challenges right now, but also some people with some skills around teaching us how to deal with that. So a quick intro through the panel. Eric Lee.
Hi everybody, I'm Eric Lee. Been in IT 24 years, been on a panel here before, but kind of notorious, I guess, lately. I wrote the IT burnout blog post that's kind of went around a few months ago, and been presenting it now at multiple VMUGs, so that's me.
Hi, so I'm Lindy Collier-Grady. I've been in IT for almost 3 years now, so my story's a little different than probably a lot of people here on the panel. I'm a VMUG leader. I founded VLadies, and I also do Hello from my home lab.
Hi, I'm Alicia Preston. I do not work in IT. I've worked in the education system for about 14 years and experienced burnout in that way. My husband does work in IT. I'm a mindfulness coach and educator. I now teach teachers, principals, nurses, doctors, federal employees, and mostly children and tweens mindful tools.
I'm Tom Green. I'm a host of the vBrownBag podcast and a member of the crew. And I have experienced burnout. I think everyone has. I've been in IT for 13 years. There's a lot of stress and a lot of different things when you're going from operations through different roles, but we'll touch on that a little bit.
Hi, I'm Kat Troyer, and I work in IT in that I've done technical recruiting since 2000, but now I do mostly career coaching, and I help run Tech Reckoning in the Influence Marketing Council. And I also teach people in my coaching energy hygiene tools that are very much like mindfulness tools. So.
Cool, so combination of different skill sets here and different experiences. And one of the things that I think is really worth discussing is around the causes of burnout, understanding what things happening in your work life are likely to drive burnout. And I'm going to start that with Tom, just as a random person who might have dealt with maybe not complete burnout, but has had some challenges in work. What sort of things do you think are the big contributors to burnout in IT?
So for me, a big contributor is the superhero worship that IT has. So I think that we all have the desire to be superheroes, and we want to solve a problem. We want to go through and troubleshoot to the end. We don't want to let it go. And that is fine if that's something that you can handle, but it gets to be too much when it starts interrupting your home life, your daily life, and you can't let things go to a point where you can't relax and you just start burning out. So really that's my whole frame of reference is I've always wanted to be a people pleaser, and I've always wanted to make people happy. And it eventually gets too much whenever the entire documentation and IT flow revolves around call Tom or call anybody. You know, it's just too much. You have to be smart about how much you're willing to give of yourself for your job. because it's the balance that we all have to make.
So I definitely see the superhero complex as being a really significant part. I absolutely love being the guy who can come in after there's been a problem on the books for 3 weeks. In the first 2 hours I'm on site, I can find the solution to that problem. Absolutely love that huge high from that success. But to say it leads to that expectation that you'll continue to superhero solve stuff. Linda, you're relatively new in IT. Have you seen some of this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, to get geared up and to study up, to have a conversation in IT, I would spend about 120 hours a week. I would fall asleep with my computer in my lap on the bed, falling off, and my kids one day were like, "Are you our mom?" You know, you know, and so. You know, just I don't know how the rest of you guys have like spent all of these years in IT, because just in the short 3 years that I've had to that I've done it, it's like going back to college.
So the learning treadmill has been a big factor for you.
Absolutely.
Alicia, you have a husband who's been working in IT for a while and has been through some changes in that. What do you see as the things that lead him towards burnout and stress?
I feel...
You can answer more generally because Mike's actually in the audience.
Yeah. So just in the past few months, I've seen a change since he's changed jobs, and he's home now. So I find being home, both of us are home working, and we have 2 children, and there really needs to be some boundaries set. So I have noticed a little bit more stress with him and his career change, just because it's just different for us and him. But I'm glad I have the skill set, and he's supported me through challenging times where I can now support him, and he uses a lot of the tools that I teach professionals. So, yeah.
And I got to imagine, Kat, that that you and John have had some times of stress and burnout over the fair few years in IT that he's had as well. Yes. Accidentally in IT, because of course he's a chemist by qualification.
Yes.
What sort of things do you see in his career?
Well, I think, you know, we run a consulting company, and there's always something to do, right? So learning how to turn off is an active learning curve that we have right now. One of the things that we're talking about is going through a bit of a digital detox, right? We're always on, always looking at our phones, and together we're going to figure out a different way. Because being plugged in all the time, I just don't think it's good for us. It's not healthy to be always plugged in. I mean, we need to kind of sometimes have our feet on the ground too, and, you know, be out in nature. That's a really good antidote to being connected in with technology all the time.
And then finally, Eric, the poster child of being burnt out in IT. You've had a couple of phases. So in addition to the recent blog post, you wrote a couple of years ago about a phase of burnout. Was it a couple of years ago? You've written a couple of times about it. And what were your...
No, so I've been through burnout officially at a scale where I had physical things happening to me, not just mentally. My hands were shaking so bad just setting and doing stuff. Like it was, and I didn't even notice it. My wife noticed it. So I had it bad enough where like I just had no idea like what was going on and stuff like that. But for me, each time was slightly different. The first time was, you know, not so much like, it's kind of hard to put into words, but like to me, it's some of these factors, you know, it's the long hours, it's the stress of projects, it's your managers or the company, it's whatever, but it's also where you're at in your life, right? Because the first time I went through it, I didn't have kids, but a lot of this stuff was happening before I got married or before I met my wife. And I could work longer hours and I could be okay. But if I tried to do some of that now, I would be burned out in like 2 weeks and I'd be like quitting my job and stuff like that. So I've been through, the last time I went through it was about 4 years ago, and I was more prepared to be aware of what was going on. But I had different things. Like I was having this fixed anxiety towards a change I made, and where I'm at now was just not very good. And I didn't want people to say I told you so, and I hated my job, and I didn't know where I was going to go, and stuff like that. And I left the best job I've ever had in my whole entire life to this day to go take this other job. And there's people in this room that told me I shouldn't go, right? That are very smart people, and you don't want to. One of them's pointing at me. And you don't want to let them down, or you don't want to hear "I told you so" or anything like that. So there's multiple contributing factors. It's not just any one thing individually for me. It's a combination of those plus where you're at in your life that will all of a sudden break that. So the more I can pay attention and try to eliminate one or two of those at a time helps me not get to that level.
Because I think there's a really significant thing, certainly as I've seen in my case, and that my wife told me that if lawyers worked at midnight, we'd already be divorced. So this was when I was in my last employee role some 15 years ago. I've been unemployable since then, or self-employed as they call it. It's not single factor, it's never just one thing that is big problems. So we have a factor of stress. We all deal with volume of work, hours worked, the constant connectedness that is both positive and negative. And that's a source of stress, the collection of things together. But it can be the sort of stress that is exciting and empowering and charging. For me, the real big burnout thing was that my management seemed to have no clue what was going on, and they had told me, we want you to give up your specialization, which was in the early days of my VMware specialization and Citrix before that. They said, well, we would like you to give that all up and be our Cisco guy. But we're still just trying to recruit somebody to be our Cisco guy, so we're not going to send you on the training or any other training. And this went on for a year. It ended when I resigned. But for a year, they said, we're not going to train you in anything, but we're going to train you as a Cisco guy, but only when we give up recruiting one. And a year later, I said, well, this is not a fun game anymore. And I really didn't want to be divorced. I quite like my wife. Many of you have met my wife, and quite a few of you ask after her before you ask how my life is going. And I can understand that. She's a really cool person. So it really a series of things building together. I think there's the stress and these things can out, but also the feeling that what you're doing is appreciated by your management, that you're doing the right thing, that it's valued. And the feeling makes a difference. So, Kat, talking about stress versus burnout and how you feel about things, you have some experience in this area. Would you like to get into that difference?
I think that stress is something that we face on a day-to-day basis, and how we respond to stress is going to impact our level of burnout. So looking at stress as something that is there, that exists, like don't bypass it, is a good way to approach it. And then to decide maybe to be a little more resilient about it is helpful for me, because I can get really overwhelmed, or I can choose to say, okay, this is, I got some lemons here, and am I going to like have sour lemon juice with my water, or am I going to make lemonade? So I think resiliency is really an important trait to develop when we're looking at something like burnout, right? The more resilient we can be, but it also is self-care too. I mean, are you getting enough sleep? Are you putting good nutrition into your body? Are you laughing at all? Is there any time for fun?
That was a really significant thing for me at one point. I realized that there was nothing funny anymore. And I like to laugh. I like particularly English humor because I have an English father. And that was a realization point for me that something needed to change.
Yeah.
Anybody else would like to weigh in on stress versus burnout? Eric, you want to?
Sure. At one of my first jobs where I worked over 11 years, I did a global Active Directory project. So we traveled all over, going and doing integration and cutting over manufacturing facilities. So you'd have to cut over on the weekend. when they had a little more downtime. And to get everything prepped, get everything shipped out, get there, train everybody that's there, get them their credentials, get them logged on. And some of these sites have, 4,000 or 5,000 employees at them. We worked 90, sometimes more 90 hours a week. That's very, very stressful to get that done. I think one of the differences between when I was doing that, 14 years ago and now is that you don't usually get a little bit of downtime. Like we would work those heavy weeks and then we'd come off and we'd have a week of downtime, right, to start prepping for the next one. Nowadays, we go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next thing because a lot of IT shops are running lean right now. And if you're like an SE for a VAR or whatever, you have to be billable like all the time. So you're constantly like going and going and going, right? So I think one of the challenges, of stress, like I can work through stress and I know where that is because of those projects I worked on, but I wasn't burnt out because I would have some downtime to recuperate before I had to do it again.
And that recuperation time, I think, is a fairly significant part of what you're teaching through your mindfulness practice.
Absolutely, and stress is everyday stimuli. We experience stress every single day, but we have the choice to react versus respond to our stress. And I'm big on naming our emotions. I find too often we experience stress and we kind of just sweep it under the carpet. But if we can name those emotions we're feeling through the day and tame them, we're more apt to not experience burnout. Burnout is feelings of, like in the beginning stages, chronic fatigue perhaps, or loss of joy of life. Very cynical attitude towards your family and anger. And it can also lead to depression and chronic fatigue, which is what I experienced. And it took me quitting my job. I left a job after 12 years of teaching. I left my pension, but when it came down to my health, and my husband was very supportive in that, it's just something we had to do with our family, because ultimately my health, our family, it's way more important to go to school, to go to work every day and experience stress every single day.
There's that comment about taking care of, you know that the minute you die, your job will be posted to be filled before there's an obituary written. Your employer isn't looking after you. If nobody else is, you must. One of the things you talked about as the early stages of stress symptoms was the fatigue, and that's something that I've found. I work from home. I work completely disconnected from the, there's no day-to-day interaction for my work, so I can choose to wander back into the house and lay down and take a rest any day. And I found during I had a really quiet first half of the year, and that's not good for me. I found I was taking an awful lot of afternoon naps. Afternoon naps are wonderful, but for me, when they end up being a 3-hour nap in the afternoon, there's something a little out of balance, and that was, for me, another indicator that I needed to think differently about things earlier this year. So,
and for me, something like that, I play video games a lot. I don't think that's a secret. But they've got one specific video game I've played on and off for 14 years. And that's the thing that whenever I start getting myself caught up playing World of Warcraft until 2 in the morning, like something has to change at that point. That is truly, like, my wife is like, you realize you're playing Warcraft again. And so that's almost our code word for you need to figure out what's going on and fix it. Because it's not healthy of working, putting my kids to bed, going back and hiding until 2, sleeping, waking up, and doing it again. I don't notice it, but it just starts becoming a spiral. So much like your naps, my video games become that.
So there can be a perfectly normal and healthy level, and then recognizing that it's grown to something that's maybe not so positive.
And for me, because I used to do that a lot, but I don't play a lot of video games, so mine was Minesweeper. But I could sit there and like click on it for hours, and I couldn't tell you like how many games I won, like whatever else. If you don't remember what you're doing when you're in that activity, then you probably have something else going on that you need to figure out why you can't focus on it. You know, like Eric Shank's blog post that he put out recently about some of that. So that's kind of like my trigger is like if I'm doing something and I don't know, like I can't remember what I was just doing, then I'm probably starting to get into that fatigue and focus and something else is starting to drive me down that path.
So Lindy, has your career in IT yet driven you to this kind of crazy?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, so my start when I was younger, I spent 15 years in the food industry. So I'm a food technologist by trade, and we went through a massive recall. I was sleeping at the facility. Later on, I had two children. I was on call 24/7. I think the dawning moment for me, and when you think about stress and burnout, was here it was, 4 o'clock in the morning. I've gotten 6 phone calls already that night from third shift, and my daughter, who was 6 months old at the time, couldn't sleep. I quit my job the next day and didn't have a backup plan, but that's kind of where you end up going when you don't deal with the stresses and you don't call that time out and you don't take care of yourself. You make radical changes and you do radical things that you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh crap, I don't have a job, and you're trying to figure things out.
That is, resigning from the nice, secure, safe day job was how I resolved out one phase of my stress as well. That was the midnight divorce thing, was to resign from that job and become self-employed and remain unemployable. Now let's be clear, my wife would have divorced a couple of times through that process as well. Being self-employed is not all happiness and roses. There's times when the market changes for me. There was a change in the way VMware training was delivered when all of my work was as a VMware trainer. All of a sudden, the prime way that as an independent I'm valued, my daily rate, got cut significantly. And that's stressful. And again, there's in my family, it's now become, is Dad's stress to ruin Christmas? Now I'm much better at handling that stress because you start to see a pattern, you start to see the behaviors that you're doing. You also, as a self-employed or as somebody who's working in a real job, learn that these things pass, that there are seasons to these high stress. That recall, there might have been smaller recalls in the past that hadn't gotten to the point of a crisis for you, or you'd get that week off after doing the big migration. But recognizing the patterns of increasing stress is really important. Just thinking about how you feel. It's really...
Yeah, I think that, the biggest thing is, as you start to feel that stress and you start to feel those things, piling up on you, the biggest thing is not to make knee-jerk reactions, because that's inherently what we want to do as humans. We want to just, react. We want to fix everything. We want to be that person that our employer is like leaning on, and you add so much to your own plate that, you lose focus. You lose your family. You lose, your job. I mean, it's just so many more things that happen because of that.
So there are small-scale things. I mean, we talked about large-scale things, resigning from jobs, not working for large companies. There's, Eric's made job changes as a result of stress. I believe recently there's been a poor fit for Tom where he changed to a new role type and then rapidly found out that it asked for things that weren't Tom. And he's now gone somewhere else where he can be the real Tom. There's big-scale things, but what we really want to try and do is avoid the situation where we get to those big scale. So this is why I wanted to have Alicia and Kat join us, is to talk about some of the smaller scale things. What else can we do on a day-to-day to help us handle that stress? And Alicia, you do this as a job, is teaching people how to do this.
Absolutely. So I feel like there's 3 different cognitive levels that we're acting at. There's the high, medium, and low. And from my experience with my husband in working IT, I feel he's always at the high level. It's always go, 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 looking at the next big project. Oh, if I have spare time, I'll do a blog post, or I'll listen to a podcast, okay? And so when you're in that constant state, you're not allowing yourself to be bored or just be. You're always at the next thing. And it's just not healthy. Then there's, and I have to say, my husband's probably the most laid-back person I know.
Yeah.
So then there's the medium stress, or medium gear. You know, you enjoy leisurely walks, you slow down a bit, but you're still not allowing yourself that space for mindfulness. Then there's the low gear. And the low gear is where we allow ourselves to be bored and just be. We finish a project, we can go for a slow walk. And when we're in that low gear, that's where we get our best creative ideas. So what I teach is mindful tools. Who said they were a superhero earlier?
Yes.
Yeah. So we are all superheroes, and we have a superpower, and that's our breath. And we don't breathe properly. We don't take our deep breaths. So when you think of mindfulness or meditation, most people think sitting lotus position in Zen pose for an hour. I can't do that. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a mindfulness coach. I can't do that. But what I can do is take those mindful moments through the day. And when we take those mindful moments through the day, science says that when those big stimuli or stressful events happen, our brain already knows, because we've been practicing those moments, and we've created cards for these. So there's some really amazing tools for you all to practice. And the key is practice. You have to practice. But when you take those mindful moments through the day, your brain already knows that, hey, I can handle this. I can take time for myself, and I can go for a slow walk, or I can listen to my favorite song and get that backbeat of the music and just breathe through it. Or I can have dinner with my family, and for the first 2 minutes, we're going to take a bite of food and put our forks down. Because science says we only taste the first 2 bites of our food, our meals, and then we're just eating as fast as we can be. So just really taking those little small moments through the day, and it can be as little as 1 minute, will help you tremendously in beating burnout and just living in the moment more.
Do you feel that maybe perhaps by doing that, you have to also release the guilt that you're taking that break?
Yeah, absolutely. Mindfulness is being present in the moment with no judgment. And no judgment is the biggest aspect that I teach. And the tools that I teach, I work mostly primarily with children and teens and tweens, but I also work with parents and caregivers. And they are tools across, it doesn't matter how old you are, from 4 years old to 100, we can all learn and practice these tools. And I know for ourselves, it's changed our family's life tremendously. Yeah.
So in terms of that feeling of guilt for taking the break, one of my weaknesses is that whenever there is any kind of problem, my solution to it is to working longer and more. But I know from basically from my work as an educator, as a trainer, I know that once you get past 25, 45 minutes on a single task, your efficiency drops. And that taking a 5-minute break, if it's sitting down, writing some code, something, building something, taking a break, walking around the block is the best way to be productive again. When I was writing design documents, if I had a block on the design document, I just couldn't work out how to put it together. I literally walked out of the office, round the block, sat back at my desk, and 90% of the time, the inspiration came and I could actually finish that out. Now, Alicia mentioned these cards. We've got a collection of 9 mindfulness strategy cards, or beating IT burnout strategy cards. I have a whole bunch of these. I've got about 30 of them with me in little plastic baggies, so come find me and grab them today. If you're not here today, or if I run out before you catch up with me, there will be more of these at the vBrownBag Tech Talk stage over in the VM Village. So just come find them. I got a bunch of them in bags. I didn't have enough bags for all of them, so there's a whole heap of them loose as well. The other thing is, if you find that VMworld is somewhat overwhelming, and it really is, we are running a mindfulness workshop. Alicia is running a workshop on Wednesday. If you go to the vBrownBag.com website, there's a blog post on there with a link to an Eventbrite. So if you reg up for that, It is only going to be a small group, so we only have capacity for taking 12 people on that workshop. But if you feel you need a break on Wednesday, it will be a really good way to build better strategies and also just to get away from the madness of VMworld. I was going to mention that all at the end, but it seemed a logical place to bring in since Alicia wrote all of the content that's on those cards.
Cat helped too, yeah.
I just cherry-picked from what they wrote to stick them on the cards, and there's really good stuff in there. So I want to talk a little more about strategies for handling stress. One of the ones is just the straight-out stop. But I wanted to ask the guys who are working in IT, the team who are working in IT, how they deal with the initial stresses of work. So Eric, as you're working now and starting to find things stressful, what kind of things do you do to handle that?
Well, the walking is great. I've got a coworker who we try almost every day to take a 20-minute walk. It's like a mile walk around our building, so we drop everything and we say no talk about work, and we try to make a good walk around the block, around the building, and do that. That's one of the things we try to do every day, to take that break and to do some of that stuff. For me, it's stepping back. It's changing focus and changing perspectives. I used to get hung up on problems, and I would let them like fester for a long time. And now that I have kids, and I like seeing them play, and I like seeing that type of stuff, my life has shifted focus. So if I start getting stressed at work, I try to take a break and focus on, what my kids are doing and what's making them happy. My daughter just got a new belt in Taekwondo, and I try to mental image her going through testing and stuff like that to just completely change my mental focus off of what's going on, to just try to bring that level down.
To get that subconscious kind of layer of problem solving that off. It's amazing how many patents correspond to bathrooms and showers, because these are the places where you're alone and can be left with your own thoughts, and inspiration comes when the other things are let go. Lindy, how are you looking at and handling stress in your work?
So I quit working on weekends. I was notorious, just constantly working on the weekend. I didn't get all this done, all my to-dos during the week. I'll just save them and I'll do them on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. And those are the times that you should be spending with your family. The other thing is, on vacation. Take a vacation. Don't bring your laptop. It's so hard to disconnect. And I think to what Kat was talking about earlier, to be able to disconnect from the digital world just for, you're given vacation, take a vacation.
I went to Hawaii last week, and I had 400 or 500 emails in my inbox. So I thought, okay, I got 5 hours here. I'm gonna burn through this and file these guys. And I got about halfway done, and they came to serve food, and I pulled out the tray table and hit my screen, and I just went, oh well. And in the past, that wouldn't have been an oh well experience. So that's a testament to the power of these tools to, and choice, right? You're at choice. Like something can happen that can freak you out, like your computer's destroyed. But I just looked at it like, okay, I needed to take some time, and the universe has provided me with additional information that I'm not to be on my computer this week, and that worked out really well for me. So.
And Tom?
So I historically have a really bad ability of handling stress. It's not one of my superpowers, I guess. I'll keep talking about superheroes. So when I am really getting stressed out, if I have the ability, I'll take my daughter to the library or go and tell stories. We like to make up stories and stuff. And if that's not a possibility, I can just go out and take a walk, as I've been working from home for the past year. So I do have that ability to just get out and walk around a little bit, just to get out and get away from the situation. But it's really hard, so I'm enjoying hearing these different techniques, because I definitely don't have it figured out. I just quit jobs and go find a new one.
If you lived where I live, that wouldn't be an option for you.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Don't. It's not a good thing. But yeah, so it's good to hear, and I'm going to be getting some of your cards. Thank you.
And I've got one more thing to add to that. One of the things I've done is I've actually talked to my boss and let my boss know what my triggers are at work so that he can, A, be aware, a second person to be aware of it. But what it also has done is by him being aware of it and helping to bring me back, like on those, when you get stuck on something and I'll tend to just sit there and sit there and sit there, is with him being aware of it and trying to help me recognize it before I do even, I've become more productive for him, which then as a team we get more stuff done. So by bringing him in and letting him know how I have problems with different things, different groups or situations, number one, and then number two, how I like to be praised when I get projects done, it just has made me more efficient and it made our relationship better, working relationship and everything else. And it feels like, I want to do more stuff for him because he's got my back. So talk to your boss as well about those types of things, and you'll be amazed, if they're a good boss, at how well they'll receive it and how well it'll help out your situation.
And if they're not prepared to stand up, that is one of the places where you say this is another factor of a reason why I might not be working in the right place. It can be as simple as a poor fit between you and your manager. They say people join companies, but they leave managers. Give your manager an opportunity to do a good job.
And during we have one-on-ones every other week, and at least one of them a month. So every other one, we talk about that stuff. So it's an open-ended conversation with us, and it should be. So try to set up that relationship if you can.
And how much do you guys work in teams where you can go side to side? So talked about having people that you go for a walk with. How much support from your peers rather than your manager above do you see?
A lot in my group. There's, like where I sit, there's a very good age range, so you can kind of tell like the ones who are willing to talk, and it tends to be the older ones who don't have the superhero and aren't trying to learn and prove themselves near as much. So in me, it's kind of the people around my age or older that you can see that we all talk about other things outside of just work and try to support each other. That's what I've seen with where I'm at now.
Linda, your team?
I really don't have a team right now, but in the past, those techniques, I think I wish I would have done. I didn't, and I think that's kind of what led to knee-jerk reactions, because I didn't do those things. I didn't call those timeouts. I didn't take care of me or how I was handling my job, and I definitely did not have conversations with my manager. And I think that's really something to focus on, because I think that if you are a manager, take heed of that. If you're not a manager and you need that type of support, talk about love signs. These are work signs that you could really focus and really make it a much better environment at work, so that's not a job and you're not going and dreading going to work every single day. I think that's imperative.
And Tom, you've been working remote for the last year. How's that been for getting peer support from your colleagues?
My pantry is my closest coworker, and it listens to me nonstop. But seriously, it is a problem whenever you're wanting to get a break from the stress and you don't have a person to go to. If you do start working from home, lock up the pantry or something, because you might accidentally gain a lot of weight. But it is something to take account of, and it does get to you. It mentally affects you whenever you stand back and you realize, well, I've been working at a job for 10 months from home, either traveling or in my office, and look at me now. What do I have to show for it? And
so I had one final thought as we're running towards the end of time, which is that it's not just us. All of us have partners in our lives. There's somebody else who is very invested in our well-being. I've talked about how my wife at a couple of times has been unhappy, and it was because we weren't communicating particularly well. I've got to say right now things are going extremely well. She's now actually involved in my work, which is the most wonderful thing. She's not too involved, which is even better. but it means that I can talk to somebody about work. I actually have a coworker. Can you sort of drill into a little bit, basically, how that dynamic with your partner works and what does work with that? And I'm just going to go from this side across. Eric, how does that work for you?
This has been the biggest challenge in my life. Is I came from a family that's very blue collar. Nobody talks about their feelings. If you're not happy, you just need to go do some work or something, and then you'll be better when you're done, right? And my wife comes from a family where they talk about everything and probably too much. So when we were dating and stuff, she would always ask, are you okay? And for me, it's like, yeah, but I wasn't, right? So talking to her has been the hardest thing I've had. Like, it was easier to talk to my boss than it was to talk to my wife. And that's because I think my boss can relate to what I'm going through better because he's in the industry than my wife could, who's a teacher. But they have their own challenges, so we can actually relate. They're just different words, but it's the same type of challenges. So I'm getting better at it, but I would say I'm still not very good at it. But that is one of the things that I've had to work the hardest at, is to be more open and talk to her in ways that we can communicate in not just IT terms, but more emotional and how I'm doing and stuff like that. So I'm getting better, but I'm still not good at it. But it's as I've worked through it, it's made our relationship even better.
I think to your point of, talking to your spouse or talking to somebody, the thing is not to keep things bottled up. You start bottling things up, and then all of a sudden they explode.
I resemble this statement.
I think that the biggest thing is, understanding or finding that person that you can, you're going to have those moments. You're going to explode, and you're just going to, blah. But then at the same time, finding that person that doesn't egg that on and build more fuel to your fire, because then all of a sudden it's not a good situation for anyone, and especially for yourself, because that even, I think in my opinion, it adds even more stress.
I had postpartum depression from my husband for about 4 years, and it finally took him researching what I was going through and telling me, like, you're not broken. I still love you. We can get through this. And if you have depression or chronic fatigue, I had back surgery, and you spoke about health and physical ailments. And for me, at 30 years old, this was years ago, I was a 30-year-old living in a 90-year-old's body. I slept all day. I had no joy at all. And there was a point where I didn't want to be alive. And it took him saying, no, this is a cloud. And I think what people don't realize is that they'll say, oh, you can snap out of it. It's really hard to snap out of it. And I'm more in tune with my emotions now, and I can say, like, I'm going down that dark slide right now. But having that support person who does not shame you and understands what you're going through and will be like, let's go for a walk, let's go talk to somebody together, because I'm right here by your side, and removing yourself from negative, toxic environments. I've lost a lot of friends over the years, but they weren't good for my health because they were always in a negative mind frame. I am so thankful for those hard times and feeling those really low levels of life and not wanting to be on this earth, because they really brought light into my life. And just don't judge what people are going through. Just be there for them. And
I think that's a general principle that I really like, is not judging other people. One of the things that my wife got really frustrated with me saying was, this is not about you. When somebody else is shitty to you, it's not actually about you. It's probably that they had a really bad day. They've probably had other problems, and they're just loading it on you. You can let it go off because it's not about you. You can just let go of it. Tom, how's things been, stress and your partner? How do you make that work, and particularly how do you help them to understand you?
So I talk a lot. I don't know if anybody who knows me, I'm pretty sure Ariel's been involved with this some. But if you get me talking or I have a open relationship, I'll just keep going and going and going, like the little dog in Looney Tunes that's just hopping around talking. So my wife hears everything. I'm just constantly talking about work.
So what you're saying is the complete opposite of Eric, that he can't start talking and you can't stop talking?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell every secret I know of from myself if you sit around me too much. But then she can start picking things out. So kind of what I've been going through where I was having problems and not really wanting to be the superhero of operations that I was at the hospital I was working at, we had an opportunity where I could get into sales and do enterprise sales. And while I talk, I'm also not a great salesman. I don't think, I did fine, but it wasn't what really drove me, what I really wanted to be doing. But we said, okay, well, you can try it. Here's a good opportunity. It's good. It can support our family. We can try it. The kids are young enough to where it won't make any big issues. And it really wasn't for me. It didn't match my personality. So I was given the freedom to be able to say, okay, well, we can go on and we can find something and get out of that. And so when I'm doing the job changes, it's always beneficial, but it's also what can I do to make myself happy so I don't annoy or don't talk so much negative about work and go all the time. So we've had a very good back and forth about that, where we are learning and know how to support me and how I can support the family, and not induce too much chicken little skies falling panic. So that's something too. Whenever you talk a lot, and a lot of panic can come out of that.
And I think there's another theme in there that it's not a done job, that it is always a continuous learning, both about yourself, but also about your partner learning about yourself. And Kat, how about you for you and John?
I like to say it's a practice. I've got multiple practices that I'm working on, but I think that takes away the desire to be perfect, right? Not that I'm probably not the only one there, and I don't have that as much because I've been working on it. But if I look at something as a practice, so this is my mindfulness practice, and I try to spend some time in the morning and some time at night, and guess what? Some days I don't do both. And that's okay because it's a practice, and tomorrow's a new day. So we've got some tools here that we've shared on these cards, and my advice with these are practice with them, right? It takes, like the first time you try something, it's odd. It may not feel comfortable. So try it a few times. Try it maybe 5, 6 times. But also there are 9, 10 different cards here. So there will be one that resonates more than others. So when you find the tools that work for you, put them in your toolkit, because everyone's different, and we're all coming with different filters and different experiences, and so we're all going to respond a little differently. So it's almost like a science project, figuring out what is going to work for you, what tools are going to work for you. So we're here this week to help with that. So if anyone wants to come and talk to us, we can do that. But look at it as an experiment and a practice, and it's so much. It's more fun. It's more like science, right? Than okay, I'm going to be mindful now, right? That's
the other thing that I've heard talked about as a way of expressing how we work professionally that applies here as well, is that you should aim to suck a little less each day, and that was suck when things went silent, right? That say that expect that you're not perfect at everything, and just try to be a little less imperfect each day rather than trying to achieve that perfection. Well, thank you very much all of the panelists for joining us here. Do check out the vBrownBag blog post about beating IT burnout. There's some additional links there. There's links to this Eric's blog post, also the one that Eric Shanks has written. I think I found a couple of others.
And I'm doing my session at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, my presentation on my whole experience going through burnout and coming out the other side, and what I do now. So come by at 1 o'clock at the vBrownBag stage for that.
And that was really well received when you did that at the NDV Mug as well. Do grab some of the strategy cards. Remember, they don't just have to be for you. You can share them with your partner, share them with your boss if they need some help as well. And just generally have a better day. Thank you all. Thank you.